Hello, welcome to Spotlight here on GRAPPL Patreon. I'm Benno.
I'm JP.
And I'm Andy.
I almost said the old line here. We got speaking of old lines, we got Andy here. I could have done the this is the British wrestling experience. What was Martin's with Richard Benson, aka Benno, and
hello Benno.
Going back in time, mate. It's a BritRes podcast. We have come full circle here. Only 2.5 years since BWE died, mate. Great to have you on.
Great to be on. It's still dead BritRes, but I'm still alive.
Who'd ever coin such a phrase, mate? What a fucking
I don't know, mate.
It does feel like it a bit though. We've got a bit of like stuff to talk about today. So we got you on to talk a bit of Doncaster pro wrestling, bit of New Japan, like classic spotlight of all JP, even a bit of Maple Leaf Pro at the end, which feels like it's taken the place of MLW that we'll get to eventually. Yeah, it does feel a little bit like the old days. Welcome to the indie corner, Chris Elliott says. Is that how far we've gone?
Mate,
IE, not why. That's all right. So.
Very, very different tone, though, of conversation for this one, though, isn't it? It's not going to be the, I'd say, it's particularly when we get around to the New Japan bit, it'll be like sort of talking about the cracking New Japan show we watched at the weekend. Spoiler alert, before we've been going into that. But yeah, no, it's a wacky lineup this week, isn't it? Like, it really just looking through it, I was like,
oh, yeah. And to be fair, Matty just kind of ran through the entire lineup on our pre-show. If you want that, by the way, you can get the audio of it by becoming a patron of any level on our Patreon at the moment. You don't even have to give it any money up. You just have to join, and you'll unlock the pre-show at least for this week. We'll see how we go going forward. You can hear all our thoughts on the WWE house show, which turned into an AEW burial. You can hear us talk. What else did we talk to? Telewatch, bit of Matty at the matches, bit of Scran of the week. That was the real. Actually, to be fair, that we've spent pretty much an hour on it, which again is old school, like an old spotlight. Before we actually get to the wrestling stuff.
Mate, there was an in-depth conversation on washing coats that then turned into different varieties of coats as well. It was kind of incredible.
I'll do that YouTube clickbait thing. Just let us know in the coats. Do you wash your coats for winter? Just let us know. Do they go in the washing machine? Is that what people do, or don't they do it? You know, a lot of people these days smell like damp puddles, which we got into there as well. But yeah, it was like one of your shows, wasn't it, Andy? It was just like shite or crap. Should we could call it crap this time rather than muck? You've got them two trademarked. Basically, what it was.
Yeah, it basically was smelling of crap.
Well, we got obviously that's up on the Patreon with the pre-show. We did record Shane this last week, which is available for people. The critically acclaimed Shane, I will say. We've got a few compliments from some big hitters in the podcasting world, I would say. JP, as we ran through the entire career of Shane McMahon, and when I say the entire career, I pretty much mean the entire career. I think we saw every single, for the most part, punch or bad punch that was thrown by Shane McMahon. Some classics from the early days. Test Steve Blackman, good trips down memory lane. Some worst trips down memory lane when it comes to Shane's many comebacks. But a cracking suggestion by Chris Platt. And I've never had such an easy go at doing some homework on this thing.
It was absolutely brilliant, mate. I tell you, if we're going from Shane the Bumper early doors to Shane and the wacky one bump that he'd end up doing, and a couple of times, I tell you, he was tempting bloody faint, to the point where Shane goes, do you know what? I'm great at MMA for some reason that seems to be that no one seems to completely understand. I love that little graphic you put on there in the back. There he is. And it's that song. I hear that song and it just makes me laugh, honestly. But it was just phenomenal because it's just covering absolutely everything. I had a good chat with Joe about this as well. This was a thing that he was just talking about. Oh, mate, like, he just sounded absolutely brilliant for this. I was like,
I think he truly believes Shane's the best in the world. I think I buy it.
Oh yeah, he did, and you know, there's a reason why he gets that as well. We even go into him in Saudi as well, which I mean, I don't know. I mean, trolling a Saudi audience. I think I brought up the suggestion that maybe that's why they held the plane hostage. That was a booking step too far, wasn't it? It was like, what you're not bringing back I don't know, Earthquake to wrestle, but like you brought out Shane McMahon and told me he's the best wrestler in the world. That's it. I'm done. Get the lads out with the AK-47s.
It was going back, and it was the stuff that wasn't on the playlist that mostly shocked me. It was that the existence of that Shane tag with fucking. It was him and who was it? Drew McIntyre against Roman Reigns and the Undertaker. Like, I still don't believe that's real. I have been told since then in the little Fed chat that I'm in with Matty and Hamflet that apparently Hamflet's a big fan of that match and we should have watched it. Apparently it's good. I don't remember it. I still don't believe it's real. I feel like if I click on it, I'm going to find out it's actually real. But goes all kinds of places. The career of Shane McMahon. And, would you say you're a fan, Andy? I'd early Shane maybe Attitude Era rather than Best in the World Shane.
I think pre-Attitude Era stuff. You know what the one where he got knocked off the Titantron, weren't it? Was it Blackman?
Oh
yeah.
Bounced him off that. I didn't mind these run as like SmackDown general manager, you know, with Daniel Bryan. I enjoyed that era of SmackDown. But probably because Raw had Stephanie and Mick Foley was like, disgusting them. I'll keep to SmackDown. I enjoyed that. He's worth his money, I do think, Shane, when he does turn up. He's none the least entertaining. That's all you ask for, isn't it? End of the day.
Oh, he's very much worth his money, dollar, isn't he? Really
we determined he was the best bad wrestler in the world. But you tell us, what's the homework, which has been greatly put together by Platt, and listen to us talk it all over on the Patreon. That's available there from £3. You can even do pay-per-views on Patreon these days. So if you only want the one show, don't know why you wouldn't want to subscribe to us for a full month. If you just want a one-off, you can get that. We've had a couple of purchases actually of our shows from Dealer's Choice Month. The Nigel show was among those. The Randy Orton show somebody bought, and I feel like they only bought it just because they wanted to hear us argue. And Matty put us through hell for 3 hours, which he did. But the Shane one, bit more of a lighter conversation. Yeah, a lot of homework, but they're definitely worth it. Platt did a cracking job. But yeah, no homework this week. We are going to be recording the latest edition of GRAPPL Live, which will be just an excuse for me, Matty, and Garrett to go to the pub this week. So, like we said, Andy, who'd ever thought of that? A podcast and a pub, but we'll find a way to make it work, as we entirely just steal yours and Jeff's idea. But yeah, should be fun that coming up, and obviously we've got the Halloween Film Club, which I believe the pics are going to be going out for as well this week, JP, with the big ball. So all kinds coming up.
Oh, we have, yeah. Really looking forward to that Halloween show that's coming up, and I've had to make a change to one of those based on a suggestion from someone else. I was like, oh no, so really looking forward to what we're going to be doing for that. So basically, I've got 2 picks, Matty's got 2 picks, Gareth's got 2 picks. You've given up your 2 picks to our wonderful patrons as well.
I trust the patrons.
They'll be choosing. Well, we trusted them before, mate, and ended up with 2 WCW in the year 2000. So it's always like there's that slight sort of edginess to it. And Andy here is a man who's reviewed all of WCW in the year 2000. He knows that's a painful fucking game.
It was funny because we'd done all of 2001 WWE, every episode of that, and then the year after was WCW 2000, and the contrast in quality there.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier on, you're going to be recording GRAPPL Lads this week, so that's going to be coming out later on this week as well. You've obviously always got the weekend show coming up. Loads and loads of absolute goodness. So if you want all of that, patreon.com/GRAPPL, or become a YouTube member at youtube.com/@GRAPPL. And I also want to give a shout out to Dickie Bird, who's announced he's becoming a dad again for the second time. Part-timer, mate. You need to get another 4 of them in to reach my levels. But yeah, he is. And obviously he is the creator of the brilliant chopped-tees.com. So that's where our merchandise is. So if you want to go over to there, there's the GRAPPL store, but there's loads of, obviously, of our friends as well, whether it be Post Wrestling, Poison Rana, loads and loads of great stuff on there. So yeah, get yourself across to there and send him a congratulations as well in the meantime, because he'll need that sleep like he will do if he's a voice of bitter experience here.
Brilliant. So yeah, I think that's all the plugs. Unless we're going full Undertaker, JP, and we try and sell some Blue Chew and some guns and some coffee subscriptions and whatever the fuck else. So that today.
PDSdebts.com. I remember that. It said in a very serious voice, said about managing your money as well, and it was like, It's got fucking weird. I can't remember. Is Trump on the other side of that room when he said that? I was like, I couldn't get my head.
He keeps eyeing him like he is, doesn't he, on the chair? I noticed that as well. This is so unbelievably. If you missed it, the news broke while we were doing the weekend show, didn't it? Fucking Undertaker having a Trump on his podcast, which was just like I did actually watch it before tonight. Actually, it suffered a bit. Unfortunately, I couldn't get through all of Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling just because I was hooked to just watching these two fucking chances go at each other. It was like, honestly, Trump couldn't remember like Dave Bautista's name. Undertaker didn't offer it because of the stuff that's obviously the challenge him, didn't he, to a 6-man tag in a clip that they made. Couldn't remember Bobby Lashley's name. It didn't feel like Trump. Did remember Haystacks Calhoun, like we were saying on the pre-show. It's like, you know, when you're in work and people like ask you about if Big Daddy or Giant Haystacks are still going. Like that felt like that was a name Trump knew. Haystacks Calhoun. Like that's where'd that come from. Apparently gets phone calls from The Rock. Fucking weird.
Felt more like, I know we were probably going right into it now. It felt more like Donald Trump interviewing The Undertaker. Yeah. Like large swathes of this.
This wrestling stuff, is it on the level? It's basically what I asked him to play. Like, just ever just get into a real fight? You've done a match, well, kind of a match at a WrestleMania. Surely you know. Like, it was so fucking strange.
Fucking weird. And I spent an hour of my time for that, and I thought I could have been watching some Canadian pro wrestling while this was going on.
That photo behind you, JP, it looks like he's got his gear from Jeremy Clarkson, you know, with the brown shoes and the light denim. He should be. He's ready for Six Nations in January.
He is. He's also hosting Calaway's farm as well, where he sets up a local farm shop. Hopefully in Oxfordshire, like Diddley Squat Farm, which is down the road here as well.
It really was, like you said, JP. It was like watching like your granddad like asking you questions. So, does he still call it the WWF? That was literally one of the questions from Fast Undertaker. Like, it's confusing, isn't it? This whole WWE WWF thing. Like, but then at the same time, he just like randomly go into rants about like, and obviously, I unfairly lost that election. To which Undertaker responded, "Yeah, that sounds like a coup." Like he'd fucking know. Like I feel like he only knows that word because of like the extended period in 1998 where the Undertaker and Kane were in cahoots in Russo booking. So I think that entered his brain as like a word that he now knows. Glenn the Cunt was stood back as well, wasn't he? Apparently, we kept referencing there. I actually wanted to. I wish we'd done like we should have done it on the pre-show, JP, like just a live watch along of your reaction to it and your reaction to them bringing up all the fucking right-wing talking points, like Undertaker wheeling out his fucking daughter at one point, so he'll get his one substantive question into Trump, which was, so yeah, all these trans people in women's sports need to stop it, don't we? Like with his daughter sat on his knees, like this, I don't know, fucking token, like here's a female athlete for you, Trump. It was so odd. Like it really. That was his question. Obviously, the most important pressing issue in the world right now is whether men are involved in women's sports. Apparently, that's what Undertaker used as one go at Trump on.
Not war in the Middle East. That was the one question he was. None of that stuff. Not the economy. Not inflation. Nothing else like that. As he wheels out his daughter on his knee and Trump calls her beautiful, and you just went, this got fucking creepy. This got instinctively creepy because there's a bloke of previous when it comes to this kind of stuff as well. And then the moment when they're talking about like, what is it? And how many times have you been married? It's like, is it your second wife? And he's just who's counting? And then they cut to an advert for Blue Chew with that other fucking gobshite who sat beside it, who works for that 9-line, like, I don't know, clothing stuff. He never fucking says a word up to that point. I think he runs
it, maybe. Because he was trying to brag it to Trump about it, wasn't he?
It's like the most patriotic apparel company as well. And I just thought, Jesus, everything's with an American flag over there, isn't it?
Is it like the Stone Island of America, in a way?
Basically, yeah. With a bit of Blue Lives Matter, Chuck. If Stone Island decides to out Blue Lives Matter on there, to do that stuff. But from a political point of view, the big talk has been sort of the last point is about how many podcasts both him and Kamala Harris is doing. You mentioned to me about she was on the Charlemagne the God podcast, which is actually a bit more of a serious podcast. I mean, like he's well up on issues. Mark Calaway is not well up on issues. You're not getting that from him. But it's how Trump is so meandering in all of this stuff, which has been the big talking point of all of his rallies, because he just rambles and he looks like a guy, like all the talk of Joe Biden not being kind of fit enough to serve is like, and this bloke is. It's just like, sorry, I don't know what world they're living in. It's just like he shouldn't have anywhere near it. And he was just like, well, why are you doing this at one point? Why are you running? And it's just like the honest answer would have been to stay out of jail in Trump's case for it. But he's not there. He's not with it. He just rambles. I'm a fine one to talk on this, but he just rambles and meanders and makes no sense.
Trump's terrible too.
And it just becomes, because it's not like it's just a conversation which happens to be filmed between the Undertaker and Donald Trump, and he's asking them about, he's telling them about TKO buying UFC, and it's just like, you should know this, Donald. You go to all the fucking pay-per-views, mate. It's a big part of your campaign rallies is turning up at those events.
And yet Taker's got none of the numbers Brandon Thirst that he has not. He's like, so is UFC bigger than WWE? He's like, I'm not really sure. Not on it, on the ins and outs of it. Just like blatantly, like on a serious note, blatantly like references to Vince McMahon, but from both of them, just like it's the most normal fucking thing in the world. Hopefully some of like the mainstream press picks up on that. It was bizarre. So the biggest thing for me, and it's never a shock. Like I'm not shocked that a wrestler is like a hardcore Republican or whatever like that. The pro wrestlers, they land on a head for a living, and as we've always said, half of them are going to represent half of the voting public, and half of the voting public in America votes for this shower. And if there are any out there, hello. I don't know why you're listening to us, but anywho. But like literally, Trump, like, Undertaker is so beta in these conversations. He's so like just, I'm so happy you're here, Mr. Trump. And he's like literally like there's a point where Trump's like, I can't believe I did this show. I turned down and he's listed like these mainstream outlets to do this. He doesn't call it a shit show, but he says something along those lines to do whatever this is type of thing. And Undertaker's just like, ha ha ha. It's like a podcast come to life with that. Was it LeBron James that Undertaker went to visit and stood outside of his dressing room in full gear? It was literally that, but in podcast form, as like Undertaker bowed to this king of the world, Donald Trump. It was so bizarre.
It was, it was. It's car crash stuff. I mean, you'll have a laugh while watching it. Don't get me wrong. If you come away from this and thinking that's the man who should be president, have a look at yourself. Honestly, have a look at yourself. If you're in there, particularly if you're in one of the swing states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, any of the Sun Belt states, like Florida, Georgia, any of those. He's honestly to God, he's got no fucking idea. No idea what's going on. It's madness, like absolute bollocks from beginning to end. But I did watch the entire hour.
But I'll wait to see whether Dwayne comes out and distances himself from it. Goes, I didn't actually ring him. I was just checking he was all right after he got shot. He always tries to stay on the outside of stuff like this, doesn't it?
That was funny.
Yeah, has there ever been a match more in heaven than yet the Undertaker's podcast and Donald Trump or hell? And absolutely Team Dave Bautista in that one as well, as I'm sure most right-minded people are. But anyway, didn't plan on start with that, but couldn't help but reference cracking background for you, JP. Like I say, the new house is looking great outside of the neighbours you've got there. But we do have you on, Andy, to talk Donald Trump. But yeah, we've got some WWE and AEW stuff to get into later. But yeah, we got you here. It is a bit of a big BritRes weekend as far as what they look like in 2024. We had a double bill really between Rev Pro in Doncaster for Global Wars and obviously New Japan Royal Quest in Crystal Palace yesterday. And you were live at the Global Wars show. Not your first trip to Doncaster.
No.
I know. Did you go in the heyday to 1PW? I know you went to the comeback shows.
Yeah, so never went to the Donny Dome in 1PW's heyday. Back in the day, it was always for like Doncaster races when I'd ever visit ever visit Doncaster. I went to, I think it was the two shows that they did at the Donny Dome on their return. The last one was where I think a couple of people in the crowd got attacked or tried to get attacked by some drunken fella. And it was the talk.
Did they get your Jeff in the end, or was he?
They did get our Jeff in the end. Yeah,
he's not running anywhere at the minute. Get well soon, Jeff.
No. But it was a talk of McDonald's that evening. That it's like, what the bloody hell's gone on here? And obviously, a couple of months later, 1PW died, and again, and lo and behold, Rev Pro decide, well, there's probably an audience in Doncaster. Well,
it is a proper it's like, it's one of those things. It's like when, obviously, in its heyday, we've talked about it, JP. Neither me or you managed to get to Doncaster. You just hear tale of, like, there's this show. It's got Steve Corino, and for some reason, Sterling James Keenan, and now Corey Graves is their world champion, and Abyss is on it. And you won't believe what Samoa Joe did with a towel, and like all of, like, the Jay Phoenix lore and all of that stuff. Like, I knew, like, GPW lads who went and worked 1PW, as I've talked about on the show before. I was once offered the booking in 1PW 18 months after I'd stopped training. That was a weird time and place, but that was one of the many comebacks.
You wouldn't have got paid, mate, would you?
That's the only thing. Definitely, choosing the podcast route was definitely the wiser one, money wise. But like, yeah, it's always kind of, I've been to 1PW shows in the past, but it was always outside of Doncaster, so I never quite got there. But it always shocked me how well they draw. And then you'd see, like I say, even this most recent comeback, which obviously those who were old enough, to laughed at, and even though you went, Andy, obviously, you weren't born yesterday. We all saw it coming. A lot of people, for younger people, we would say, in this community, did maybe not see it coming. But even then, one thing is like a older head who was like side-eyeing it, going, well, this is going to go badly, and it did. I was still shocked at the numbers they did. So there's still clearly an audience of people who see a show at the Doncaster Dome and travel and go, and it makes sense to me to run there.
Yeah, they drew like maybe 1,000 people, or just over 1,000 for both shows there, and the one the one or two that they did in Lincoln as well at the Engine Shed, they drew excellently as well. It just like everything behind the scenes, where it once again fucked up with the money, but like the thing that they did, like, promote 1PW was bringing back, like, the old deathmatch wrestlers, like your old Furmans, your Icemans. Darren Burridge were back on the show, so playing very much up to that crowd who had gone to the original 1PW. And I sort of remember from, like, the first show that they did back there, and chatting to someone in the like the bar queue. And they said, I've not been to watch wrestling in Doncaster or any wrestling since 1PW died, and I've returned just because of that. Yeah.
There were forums full of the cunts. Like, it was just odd. Yeah. It's just like they're still kind of out there. But like, I was going to say to you, Andy, how did Rev Pro do as far as, obviously not going to spend most of our time on Royal Quest, but to be honest, I think Global Wars has the better matches.
Yeah.
But like, how do you think they did as far as like cultivating that past audience? About 700, it looks like they did.
Yeah, about 600
on the day.
So about 650 to 700. They curtained off the balcony area, which 1PW had used in the past. They tried to set it up more like a TV style setup. So you've got the center point, and also two like stands on the outside, and it was relatively full. I thought it was a cracking setup because you're quite low down, and it's literally the ring's very close up to you, and the entrance there is very minimal. It's only a little like screen and walking out, so couldn't fault the setup with it. I think for I probably said this a couple of days ago, was like, for a Brit Rest show nowadays, 700 people would take that a promotion.
I heard you and Jack talking about it. Like, that's their numbers that don't get seen in Manchester now, do they? From like, when Progress go run the Ritz, or the odd time Rev Pro have come up here, like that'd be a good number, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you bite your hand off. And one of the things we did find out at the weekend, that there was no advertising on the website, on Donny Doan's website, which is a missed opportunity. To say that's, you could easily just set up a link through that website to Rev Pro's site to sell an extra few tickets.
I get the impression it's a town, and a wrestling town, that if you do that local advertising, there are enough people who may not know anything really about the product, but they'll casually come along. And if there's a couple of names that they recognise, that you can get to that 1,000 relatively easily. And like you said, I've never been there, but from first glance, when you look at it as an arena, you think, this is good. We don't have many arenas like this. that can do like about 1,000
No.
people. Looks good setup with easy sight lines and other things like that. You know, I think there's the point that you know that you had said with Jeff as well about, you know, well, if you're running Manchester, how much more are you paying if you're doing the Victoria warehouse?
Yeah.
If you're trying to like sell it, how much more are you paying in terms of the rental? Does it become cost effective unless you're drawing like kind of 600-700 for that?
Yeah.
And that's not a guarantee, because as you guys said, like Manchester is a wrestling town outside of like WWE. It's hard to draw great.
Yeah, because like the academy, when Fight Club Pro were running there, like tops it got in there maybe 800, but the academy wants such a vast space, you end up getting swallowed up by it. Soft Pro ran there, the second show got about 250, looked dead. Whereas he went to Academy 2, which is in the separate building, it looked perfect. But even then, Academy 1 and Academy 2 cost an arm and a leg to run. You got the Albert Hall where Lucha Libre show ran once. And that I think that cost about $5 or $6 grand to run, if I remember from when they were going. So they're not going to want to really pay that. And then you've got other venues. Progress has got the rates. Yeah. And then you're talking smaller venues, which is like 100, 200. That Taco Town venue's shut, thankfully. but then you go into outside where the Victoria warehouse, which it were all right the first time we went there, but since it's been rebadged,
that was Doncaster as well, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, it was about 1,000, and it's a good venue, but I think when it got rebadged as an O2, it just went downhill a bit, like most O2 venues, and the amenities outside there are not brilliant. And the only other one I always mention is the new Century Hall, which is next to Victoria Station, has its own like street food place on the ground floor. Future Shot ran there once, but I don't know what it is with there. It might be cost too much, or they just, you know, some venues don't want wrestling, do they? So
yeah, that's it. It sounds like the Donny Dome didn't, based on they'll have advertising, but they have to be happy with this, you know. Like I say, 700 people is a lot of people. I watched before Royal Quest. Basically, there's the second half, at least, of the live broadcast is up on Rev Pro's on demand, and I watched that, so I saw the bulk of the main bit of the show. And like I said earlier, it definitely had better matches than Royal Quest did. We knew that going into Royal Quest, that was probably gonna be an issue. But like the thing for me, like I enjoyed Lukishi. That was a good main event. Maybe the weaker of their matches. Maybe I think there's a reason for that. RKJ Oku, I enjoyed Zach's homecoming with Robbie X. But the biggest takeaway was, and I don't know whether you'd agree or not, was like it didn't feel like a crowd that were fully into it and fully on board with it and fully buying into kind of what Rev Pro was selling. They were there to see a wrestling show, but were they reacting in the ways that you would want, maybe that goes to the fact that it's first time here and Rev Pro don't come up to north too much, but it did come through in the broadcast. It felt like watching it back yesterday.
Yeah, I would say with the crowd itself, because I asked Jeff about this, and I've even seen on the Discord people say that the atmosphere didn't come across too well, and they probably want to lower the mic volume and turn up the crowd volume on the production. But less said about that. But I thought that the crowd seemed into it most of the evening. The thing is, up that end of the country, they run Sheffield 5-6 times a year at the network. Very central, and they get a ton 50-200 in their max. It's a similar crowd what Southside used to get at the Corporation. But always the issue with the Sheffield shows, it plays second fiddle to Stevenage the night before. It's always on a double header with Stevenage and St Neots, and that's like the big shows, it seems. And it's like, oh, right, we've got a show in Sheffield. We'll announce the card 2 or 3 days beforehand. And you sort of relying nowadays on a lot of British wrestling is like, what does the card look like? What wrestlers are on? And when you're doing it 2 or 3 days before, it's like, well, I'm not really asked to go in. For me personally, I'll go to Rev Pro shows locally because it's the name that sells it. And I always think the quality of the wrestling's good. But to a neutral who's sitting on the fence about whether to go or not, it's like, I'm not really asked. But I will say with this Global Wars show on the
He had a
last
lot of
show,
it down, didn't he? Like Ishii Luke was pretty much announced at the time of. So it said on commentary the Copper Box was 2 months ago, and we do time a lot on this podcast. But I was like, "What? That was 2 months ago? Like what? It was genuinely. Look at your calendar. Somehow it was, but we've known that since then. So there's been push at least.
But that Sheffield show, they actually announced 3 or 4 things on that show. It's a localist crowd. Sheffield to Doncaster is only 15, 20 minutes on the train. So they at least announced some things to get people hyped for it. And the base of this card was announced maybe 3-4 weeks out. So they've not done anything wrong there. It's just, I know some people might say the ticket prices, but it was like 33 quid with cheapest ticket. 33 and 40 quid was the the tiered seating, which for what acts you are getting on, you're getting some from New Japan, AEW on there, you're getting some of the cream of British wrestling. It's worth it, but it's when you go to the front row prices and you see 110 quid, you're like, oh, no. And so I know wrestling fans have deep pockets, but sometimes you got to think, is it worth?
I think
that?
they did sell them all based on
They did.
The stats that I think it's Young Mark on our Discord. I think they sold all full at 3 of the front rows. I guess it's like anything, isn't it? Like you always say, Andy. As much as we moan about ticket pricing, look at any gig that you want to go to. What's an average ticket price now to go see someone you like? It's
70, 80 quid.
Yeah, 30 or 40 feels like a bargain at times. When I went to see Drew the Damages of the week, it was like 28, and I felt like some out like, bloody hell, it's below 30 quid to go see a gig. So there is that as well. But it's one of them. If they sell, they sell. Maybe it is like the lower price ones that they could have shifted some more of. But did it affect you for watching the show back, JP? I know you saw at least the highlights of the main matches here. What did you make of them?
So, I mean, in the end, I saw the whole show sort of before Royal Quest. I managed to see it in the 2 parts, a little bit on the Saturday evening for part 1, and then most of the other one when I was packing boxes and shifting them. I had it on I'd Chromecasted it to the TV and had it on there as well. And I think I'd sort of echo a lot of the thoughts of sometimes it was difficult to hear the crowd because of some of the reaction. Now that could be sweetened up in post. You don't know whether or not that's when they get it sort of high def up. Like those first versions on Rev Pro on Demand, that live version is just being able to get it. And I think in some ways I'm grateful for Small Mercies that we're able to watch this show live. Just having that capability is something that British wrestling's just never been able to do. That now actually we are at that point in proceedings where we do have that. I think in terms of I suppose really early on for the bits maybe you would have seen, I thought it was good without anything absolutely blow away. There wasn't anything from it I would have said kind of those top 2, Oku, Ricky Knight Jr. and Luke Jacobs Ishii are the 2 strongest matches, but nothing shit to the bed necessarily underneath. There was stuff that was kind of there, and I was thinking back to the thoughts when you and Jeff were talking about Will Caven and Cameron Kai, for example. That's a match being thrown together because there's no Leo Rush. I put down in my notes of him as the American Chris Ridgway.
I think he did make it to the country, to be fair to him. He did. Yeah, that's the story.
He did.
That he did. He did land. He had some travel issues. Yeah,
I just thought he looked at Doncaster and went, "Nah, fuck it, I'll go and watch the football or something like that instead."
Yeah,
could have done that as well. But it was more that it was intriguing to see in terms of some of the names that they had access to and how they were used. It was used in a lot more of a creative way than what Royal Quest was, and I found this to be a lot more of an enjoy. I mean, don't want to do the spoiler for the Royal Quest review, but I found it to be a fucking slog. Whereas this actually felt like it was like a nice, quite light wrestling show that was relatively easy to watch. As a primer for a new event, for a new town, a new market, it's probably as good as, like you said, Andy, you've got some stars from New Japan. Just being able to see Tanahashi in Doncaster alone.
Yeah.
It's the stuff. Imagine saying that to someone in like 2012. Yeah, Tanahashi and Doncaster. He'd be like, "What? Is it like Jake Roberts in Aldershot, isn't it? It's just like stuff's gone wrong with him."
It's like in 2024, Takeshita in the Frog and Bucket from about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
It's mad, yeah. A lot of people just didn't know the name at that point either. Yeah. It's the idea of like, fuck, you could have been there, and saw them in such a small venue. Yeah, I kind of share those highlights for me. I think for me, Zach Robbie X came across really well on the VOD for me. Andy, I enjoyed that. The post match stuff with obviously Robbie, which would lead into Royal Quest, and I'm turning down the TMDK shirt from Zach, and continuing the story that those who invested have been noting, whether it's story or not. A lot of looking at the lights. For Robbie X, but yeah, you got to see Zach's homecoming, I suppose, of a kind there in Doncaster Dome. Any big notes on that? And yeah, what were your other highlights?
Yeah, so the Zack one, I enjoy Zack Sabre Jr.'s matches. It's just all the submission stuff where he manages to counter out of whatever the other wrestlers try to put on him. I think it was the finish where he's like pushed Robbie out the way and then just grabbed him in that submission and just tangled him up. Robbie X, I know he made the joke Jobby X in checking the wattage on the white bulls, but he deserves his opportunity in New Japan. Something different to do. He's probably done as much as he can on the British scene. Yeah. He's been around longer than the mother-in-law, hasn't he? Yeah, but you just sort of hope that in New Japan, he's not used as just fodder, to be honest, just for this J-Cup tag tournament, whatever they're doing. He's more of a prolonged run. Other stuff on the show. Oh, I will say Zack Sabre Jr. I think I mentioned this in the Discord. TMDK's theme tunes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. On my Spotify today, that tune. Some of the other stuff, that was a bit Cameron Kai and Will Caven. I said it was probably the right spot for it on the card being first on, because if you had it later in the show, because there's no breaks on this show, I think people would have just left. I think it's an indictment where the cruiserweight division is, where it needs some more contenders, or it's waiting for Leo Rush to come back and win. And then you fall into the trap of, it's another import with the title. I enjoyed Azumi versus Kanji. Out of the two women's matches, I thought that was spot on. Kanji's someone who I've seen for, bloody hell, probably about half a dozen years now. Used to see her in that little cafe in Leeds for Tidal.
Nottingham Zone.
Yeah. And first time seeing Azumi, I thought she's really good. Probably want to see Rev Pro bring her back. The 6-man tag with Tanahashi struggling to run, but he's still flying off the top rope.
I was going to get to January 2026. Like that was my main thought coming out of this weekend.
And I know we're on about Randy Orton being the big daddy of WWE, running in and beating everyone up. He was Japanese big daddy, batting everyone and saving his sons.
I think there's an interesting thing here about, if you think what Tanahashi's role is, and he'd be smart enough to say, okay, he's here. He's, like there's a little bit of a kind of like a scouting mission, effectively, he would do. And I almost came away, rather than expecting like perhaps great knockout matches, I was thinking, if he's talent scouting, who's he looking at? Who are the wrestlers he's thinking they could bring in? Who he's teaming with, recommending, because I mean, obviously it teased the Zazuya Leon Slater, which is like you said about like the cruiserweight.
Like, with them, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not going to be like, it's like you mentioned earlier on. They're not being. It feels like Leon Slater's past that now. He's done his sort of stint of being cruiserweights, and it's just trying to build up new names and new faces in that division. But I wonder there if he was looking at it thinking, oh, okay, so who are some of the people we could maybe like bring over at various points? I wondered whether or not, even dare I say it, like, I mean, the likes of a JJ Gale that he'd look at and go like, okay, that's an interesting, someone to keep an eye on rather than someone they're bringing in today. but just to see, okay, this is someone who feels like they're reliable in the ring, like a Zazoya and even Leon Slayer and a Connor Mills, just people in who he'd feel confident about New Japan wrestlers wrestling. Well, they know what they're doing, and they treat this seriously enough, and they're not like complete scrubs. That there's that aspect to it as well. And I think you mentioned about the opener, just how young Cameron Kai is. I think he's still only 18.
Like, still got loads of potential, hasn't he, Cameron Kai? It's just when I see Will Caven as champion, it doesn't look like a champion for me. I've never been sold.
Half a haircut, he said it. They did that great chant that you brought out as well about whose house, shit house, which is awesome.
How did Ricky Knight Jr. and Oku come across on live, Andy? Like that was one where, again, on that I felt the most invested the crowd were on the VOD. I don't know whether that was the real life stuff going on with Ricky Knight Jr. Obviously, was very much the heel for the match, but it definitely it felt like people got more invested in it, like some of the near falls, the one on the what was it? It was when Oku got his foot on the ropes there near the end. That seemed like it got a really big reaction. It was one of those. It felt like a bit of a story match and a bit of like a match that the only thing I would say is 2 years ago you would have thought this would be a big York Hall main event match. Like I remember when Joe came to the last Crystal Palace show and he was kind of like, what happened to Ricky Knight Jr.? Why is he not in this? Got Oku up there being, in the big spot with Ospreay. When he last was invested in Rev Pro, Ricky Knight Jr. was up at that level, and it felt like they were going to be the two guys, like that next generation, really, to headline shows. And I think they've made it part of the story, haven't they? But like Ricky Knight Jr. is definitely the one wagging behind it, and I suppose it adds to kind of the character work that he did in this one. But yeah, a match that you would have imagined would be a bigger deal than it I suppose it was here.
Yeah, I think they'd only faced off once before in like Rev Pro, which, for Brit Rest standards nowadays, where everyone's facing everyone the same every bloody week, it's a surprise.
And it felt like the first of something, didn't it? This felt like something obviously we're going to be circling back to.
Yeah. I think as a match, it delivered in spades. Michael Oku, he's always going to be the baby face in peril, and he takes a good beating. He does do, and it emotes to the crowd, and you want to get behind him. Ricky Knight Jr., even though he's been playing a bit of a tweener, I know at Copper Box he come out like, oh, this is his you bad guy persona, but it seems to have like reverted back to whether he's got the face on or not, whether he's found out if he's lost when he's coming out the curtain. I thought it was just a cracking match. I think I said like about how they kept it to a 30-minute time limit, because if you give these lads 60 minutes, I think they'd go 60 minutes, wouldn't they? And my favourite spot was the one where Oku went for the springboard moonsault, like the lion salt, and then RKJ just caught him and just tombstoned him on his head. Oh, that was a great reaction. Ball. Yeah. Oku winning. It's one of them. I think the result was never in doubt, because you sort of expected him to, get the rematch with Jacobs along the way. But it's interesting what they do with RKJ now, or whether they go down that, heel route with a, babyface Luke, and going on.
People were expecting it for a while.
Yeah.
See, I wondered whether or not, as a result of this, because we're getting Oku versus Jacobs, which I'm assuming is it Uprising?
Yeah,
is it
Uprising
for at York Hall? I keep on, because it's something I've been saying for a while. Like, I mean, if he's around, then at some point you need to explore the heel run, and whether or not that would be the place where he's so desperate to get his title back that you have that kind of like, you eventually can get into the heel run, just because it feels like untapped and something for him to do that's different. But then where does that leave Ricky Knight Jr.? Because he's not going to be, he still isn't the most natural baby face, even though like he could win round like elements of the crowd at times if he's so motivated. But we haven't seen much of that motivation in a while. He's been treading water for what feels like the last couple of years, almost, as just a guy who's been ever since he had that title run and he lost it to Great O'Khan. It's just been like kind of we've just been like spinning his heels. Really, he's not really doing like
because he had little bits with like Rampage Brown, and I think there was a thing with Gabe Kidd which never came off, which we were going to have a match with him. Yeah, it's little bits and bats of feuds. He had obviously the one with Mike D from Belgium. Loves beating that lad. He's faced him twice in Sheffield and come out with a score of 3-0. So yeah.
Well, I was going to say the last thing before we move on to Royal Quest, obviously Oku related, as he came out at the end of the show, was Luke Jacobs finally vanquishing those demons with Tomohiro Ishii and getting a win over him, which is, you know, I think that meant more a few years ago, but I think in the Rev Pro environment, a win over Ishii in a big spot like this, especially someone like Luke who's lost to him twice in other matches, does mean a lot. And it's obviously the fact that Ishii's willing to do it says something as well. Unfortunately, I think that I'm going to get into it with Royal Quest, but I think, you know, a lot of TV losses for Ishii in general on American TV, and maybe a slot in New Japan not being what it was, you know, that is a level to that. But it's still a big hump for Luke to get over. It didn't feel like the crowd really got into the main for me until the closing stretch, which definitely put it below the other two matches with these two, both of which I was in the building for. But yeah, good important win for Luke as champion, and a good way to set up the stare down with Oku and to go to obviously that rematch as you just mentioned.
Yeah,
come off the build now.
Yeah, I'm going to say with it, I think quite a few people are thinking that he should have got the win the second time at Crystal Palace
with all the eyes on it.
Yeah, and that ended up just like a 10-minute match and felt throwaway and forgettable. But it's nice that they have gone back to it to, you know, get the demon away of not beating Ishii. And I thought, you know, Ishii on these shows, he always pulls out a cracker. Whoever he's against, don't think he's had many duff matches. I know what you mean about on AEW, like the aura goes away with him and
that's a bit for me.
Suzuki. But it's still, you know, a big thing to do. But they did a thing with JJ Gale saying to Luke, if I'm going to do what you can't do is beat Ishii, and then JJ Gale got beaten. It seems ever since then, JJ Gale's just like, nope, put her off back down the card, where I was thinking JJ had beat Ishii, and then, you know, that's your ready-made contender for Luke along the way. If, you know, if Oku were available or RKJ, you could revisit some of the JJ Gale and Luke Jacobs matches. But, you know, alas not. For me, it was a, you know, cracking main event. You'd be going 4 stars on it. Easy enough. Yeah, but yeah, no, I fully enjoyed it as a live experience.
Definitely. Well, go on, JP.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, I think it's like the point you raised earlier on. This is not the Tomohiro. It's not the Ishii of what we like. We think of his like sort of, well, I'd say almost classic run in Rev Pro. So like the matches with Keith Lee and the like as well, where he was genuinely the draw for coming down, and you were like, New Japan aren't using him like outside of G1s particularly great. We can get this guy a lot. He isn't at that level, but he still has that historical significance, and there still is that kind of like sort of stature. So I was kind of happy, like, and it made obvious sense for him to get that kind of win, even if the crowd were trying to sing Bon Jovi during this one.
There was a group of lads behind me who would try to start with the bloody Dead or Alive Bon Jovi.
Died of death on the fucking VOD.
Didn't work.
Hell on its ass.
Yeah, Will says here, obviously, I would have melt more if it was in London. Obviously, ideal world, that match happens on what we're about to get into, New Japan are still running the copper box and Jacobs gets the win there. I doubt it on a New Japan show, but on an equivalent kind of big stage in front of the bigger audience. Still good it happened. Something you can play back on tape, and it tells a better story now, doesn't it? We had that trilogy, and yes, Luke lost twice, but he won the one that mattered, and it does give him a lot more credibility going forward as a champion. But yeah, that was the Global Wars show, which I think we'd all agree was the better of the two on this weekend, as it was the lead into. And interesting thing, obviously, Andy, you made it to Doncaster, and there were some of the hardcores on our Discord who did Doncaster and also made it down to Crystal Palace in the midst of some travel woes as well, getting into that area for the Royal Quest show on the Sunday. I will say, cards on the table, when I first found out about the Royal Quest date on that Sunday. And, there's a reason we're starting with this. It's a big... Royal Quest was a big fucking show on the calendar. The first Copperbox show, GRAPPL and BWE legend of me not going to that show and opting to try and watch the pay-per-views in Matty's house. Actually, was the excuse. It was a mistake. Wish I was there. Felt like I missed out on history not being there that night. Was there last year for last year's Royal Quest, and obviously attendance was down even on the Rev Pro show. Actually, considerably so on the Rev Pro show. From last year, but still, was felt like an event, and there were a lot of stars there. And this Royal Quest, like I say, I booked a hotel, booked a Premier Inn. I'd forgotten about it. I got an email on Saturday. I woke up on Saturday morning to an email going about your booking tomorrow. And I was like, fucking what? I could not have cancelled that booking any quicker. I was honestly, I've never, my heart skipped a beat. Thought I was going to be losing fucking 100 quid on this booking. Oh, worse than that, I was going to have to go and watch some of this card, because this card, like as much as I enjoyed, Global Wars for what it was, I really found Royal Quest a slog. I reckon, to be fair, the people who did go, it felt like they were the hardcore, the fans who were going to go because it's New Japan. It really felt like, and that's kind of the take I got from people who were there in the building. There are obviously people who are still invested in that New Japan brand, who are going to go because it's a New Japan show in the UK, and that's kind of what this was. It was very much a house show where, it's like when they tour and we read out those cards on the weekend show, JP, and it's, there were less six-mans here, but it had that kind of vibe of, you get to see the stars in New Japan, you do a little meet and greet, you get your photos, and you get to see Zack Homecoming, and I think that was enough for a lot of people. But for me, this card just wasn't doing it, and it felt typical of New Japan, I think, in 2024, where, like I've just mentioned, the UK market has been very kind to New Japan. They've had this great relationship with Rev Pro. They've done a lot of busy buildings, even in a downswinging business in Japan. It's always felt a little bit hotter when they've been over here. But it's also always felt a little bit like they take the market for granted. They don't always send their best. It's usually the lads in the t-shirts. And there's often, when it comes to booking and politics, and you'll always joke about it, Andy, as to who goes over in that relationship a lot of the time. New Japan is often Big Brother, even when these days I'm not 100% sure how much of a bigger brother they are. And I just don't feel like they sent to get cards on the table right away, sent the best here. Like, this was a house show, and I'm made up that it was free and available on Rev Pro on demand, because it wasn't a pay-per-view card that New Japan offered here to this market. It was very clearly the weakest of the Global Wars shows, and I really do feel like, unless you were there in the building and you got to see some of your favorites come out, and got to see Tanahashi come out one more time, and got to see Zack do a homecoming, but in his territory down in London with the title, it was a slog to watch this show through live. And yeah, Zack and Sanada as a main event was probably the pick of the litter when it came to the matches, outside of maybe the tag match, which was pretty good as well. But yeah, wasn't much to get excited there about JP, I would say.
Oh God, no. It felt, it's difficult because there's little intermittent moments where we'll get kind of go, okay, there's the potential for New Japan to do something. There's the potential for them to kind of take this a bit more seriously and almost start the big rebuilding project. And then you look at this card, and it's really half-assed, isn't it?
We won't be doing a match-by-match breakdown. Like, we'll get through this quicker than Global Wars, to be honest.
Bloody hell!
So little takes on these matches.
It was like I was watching it, and I was really grateful when you had said, because my back was killing me from shifting boxes, and I'd started watching this. And I was just like, fucking hell, I'm sacrificing Liverpool versus bloody Chelsea for this particular show. But it was just, I don't know, it was just, it felt like New Japan just going through the motions. And I think that probably just would be reflected in, if you look at the numbers, you compare when, and Andy, I was sat with you for the very first Raw Quest show.
Yeah.
And that was like 6,500 people were fucking buzzing. It was they were all really excited. And then there's this. Yeah. And you're going, I think young Mark in our Discord worked it out as like sort of about 1,500 in the end. And you go, well, that's entirely on them.
And crowd sounded good. Crowd sounded really good on the show last night, I thought.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have to say, yeah, there was like sort of like slightly better elements to it than that. But it was just, it's very hard to get excited or enthused by bits of it. And when you see it and you kind of know exactly where they're going with this, it's just that, like, okay, we are in the build to Wrestle Kingdom / Wrestle Dynasty. So you're expecting a bit more effort. You're expecting a bit more like kind of excitement and enthusiasm. You think you still want to build this. You still want to make sure you can get these people, everyone subscribing to New Japan World and the like, and try and even get those people who might think about going over. This show wouldn't have done anything for that as well. And it wasn't even like what I would say that Global Wars had, even if there were elements where you might say, okay, that you know what the result is going to be, you know who's going to be taking the pinfall. There's at least enough kind of like, oh, there's a novelty to it. Like, say Mina Shirakawa versus Lizzie Evo. There's a novelty in that match. There's none of, I just didn't sense any of that here. And I thought the match that summed it up, and it wasn't like one of the big matches on the card, but Kosei Fujita versus Michael Oku.
Oh, don't get me started on that one, mate.
Fucking way Michael Oku should be taking a pinfall loss to Kosei Fujita. And that's not Rev Pro's not in charge.
The fourth guy in the stable, isn't he?
Yeah. I'd say fifth at this point. Yeah. I don't even know who the fuck Hartley Jackson is, but he's behind Oiwa, who's just joined it. And I still don't know who he is. He could be living next door to the new place where I'm moving to. And
I think he hosts the biggest podcast for them. Pretty sure that's about it.
Yes. But for this, it's just like you've got him beating Oku clean. So to build him up as a challenger to Gabriel Kidd. And he's just going to lose to Gabe Kidd. He's not going to mean anything. You're not going to take it.
That's what spoiled it on. That's what spoiled it on commentary, because I like who's this lad? I'm sure he's just like one of the angers on from Sets of 7G of TMDK. That's all I thought he were. And then Chris Charlton piped up, always the next challenger for the New Japan Strong title. I'm like, oh fuck no, Oku's going to lose. And this laptop nearly went out the window when Oku got pinned. I was like, there's a reason why I've not had New Japan World for years. Shit.
For me, I thought you were going to say that, JP, because you're absolutely right. The finish of that sums it up, and the match was pretty underwhelming too. And I don't think that was Oku's fault. But like the match that summed it up for me was, don't get me wrong, do I want to see a 25-minute Taka Michinoku match in 2024? No. But if you're going to book him on this show, like this is New Japan, like obviously there's an affinity in the West. We have Taka Michinoku, and like I thought Gideon Gray was actually really good on commentary through the night, and he even referenced it like, oh, Taka Michinoku, the biggest heel here, not coming out to his maybe it was Charlton actually, to be fair to him, give him some credit, not coming out to his WWE theme felt like a missed opportunity on the New Japan side, because like we all have that affinity to Attitude Era, early 2000s WWF Taka Michinoku, and he's just going to be more over than a lot of the roster when they come over, and I believe that was represented in like the lines for the photos and things like that. Like he got a great reaction coming out, and it's like this is the one show in the year where Taka Michinoku is like 50% more over than he usually is. Like let's reward those fans who are excited to see him. No, we got a fucking ghetto match, and then to top it off, then fucking fake Jay White, and I know he's come along a bit, Dave Finley, but I wouldn't say in particularly interesting ways, like goes over him quickly, and it was like, that's what you get for caring, and like all in the name of, I'm sure in Ghetto's mind, heat. We're going to get heat on David Finley by putting him over Taka Michinoku. But I think sometimes you just got to, like, in a card where there wasn't many bright spots, just give the people what they want. And that kind of summed them up for me, that they aren't that promotion. They are, very much fun. We quibble about WWE and AEW year round JP, but now the company is as badly booked as Ghetto's New Japan these days. I'm not saying that's, one for one exactly, what this is. It's hardly the most important match on the show, but it's just something the feeling of watching 2024 New Japan to me, especially in this house show environment where you could have just done a little bit more, and given that live crowd something to just, enjoy for a bit, have a bit of fun.
Just a fucking gigantic waste of time. Not a massive amount of time, but whatever time you spent watching it, it was a bloody waste. Like I say, even if it had just been a comedy match for less than 10 minutes, I would have been fine with that. But instead, it's just like, and this serves what purpose? Like, what is the big takeaway from all of this? Finley's a heel. Okay, he was beforehand. Like, there's nothing that has changed in any of this.
In the words of a great man, JP,
heat. But it's
not that great man.
It's bullshit heat as well. It's just like heat where I'm just like, really? Just again, stuff that is quite lazy ultimately, and shows a kind of lack of care and forethought. That even if it wasn't like kind of, there are other people he could have had. Like, if you weren't going to do a proper match with Taka Michinoku, there are other people he could have had a proper match with. Like, even if it's seen Michael Oku lose this match to David Finlay, I'd have kind of been all right about that. So I'd have gone, well, he's a global champion. He's he's someone there. He's got a bit of.
Is that the second biggest belt in New Japan? Fucking hell!
I know. I don't even know what it fucking means. That belt.
My word.
There is a bigger mistake, and I'm an advocate of having less belts around the place. But my God, getting rid of that intercontinental title was one of the worst fucking decisions it made. It was
the only secondary belt that meant anything. Like, that was the thing.
It was. Used to be able to headline with it, like headline the fucking dome with it, for God's sakes. And it was a big deal. But it ruined the IWGP World title. It meant they had to kind of create a secondary title out of fucking nowhere. They did it in a three-way with Ospreay and Moxley and gave it to the least interesting part out of all of the three of them. You're just like, oh my God, just a waste of fucking time.
Yeah. Did anyone have any highlights from the show itself? I would say I enjoyed the tag. I thought TMDK looked good. As good as they look, but them and Tanahashi and Ishii had a bit of heat behind it. It was a point in the night. It was like 3.5 stars. I think we were joking about it in the Discord, Andy, which meant it was a star higher than else before it on the show. To be honest, probably better than the main events, which was probably a 3.25 for me. But I'm only, there's going to be limits to our invest. I can get into Sonada as Zack Sabre Jr.'s first challenger. No. But that was kind of the ceiling for this show, unfortunately. At least if you weren't in the building and getting swept up in it, and seeing these guys live.
Yeah, I was like you, Benno. I thought the tag match was good. I said about 3.5 stars. Tanahashi and Ishii work well as a tag team. TMDK.
For Tanahashi these days, like it's where he should be for next year.
Yeah, just hiding him sort of things. Do the minimal bits good, and there you go. Obviously Sonada in the main event, he looks dead behind the eyes, that lad. Absolutely.
He's never been alive beyond the eyes, mate. He's the biggest zombie.
Why do we always get him? Why has he been over so much? Like, somebody do the numbers. I'm sure he's the New Japan wrestler outside of Ishii, who we've had.
Where did he get is it just because he's a good-looking fella that they think he's got personality and charisma? He's fucking dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. Should be nowhere near the top line. Tell you who's got charisma, and he was on the Global Wars show, Yota Tsuji.
Yeah,
he should be. He
was a highlight.
Top dog. He's. I know he has all the songs and everything because he's returned to the UK. But
you created those songs, mate.
A bit of Baccarat and what have you. But he just takes it in as a smile, and people will react to that and think, yeah, no, he's our guy. He's on our side. He was against Dan Maloney, who, bloody hell, I don't see anything in him. Honestly, I don't.
He treated it like it was a Rev Pro book and he didn't want to be there. And it felt like watching it. Like, I know that was the character he was trying to play in the match, but like, he's leaning into that heat money.
Who else were there? Shota Umino. I see he got rid of his Tanahashi locks against Callum Newman. That went on a bit. It was all right, the base of the work. Yeah, there's not much else, is there? The unpronounceables were on later on with T-shirt Naito. I was glad someone in the crowd that started that chant, but it's not in jest. It's because it's true. He's a lazy sod.
But I think that's the problem is though. I think that's okay now. I think now he's dropped the belt. We can just all accept that he's not what he was. He's walking on, he's got elbows for knees, like I used to say about Tanahashi. He is, or even worse. Like, I think this should be what he's doing. For an international show, he should be hitting away. The problem is he was doing this 3 years ago. He was doing this 4 years ago. He's had moments when he's been over.
His best things when he takes his pants off, innit? Like, them old Kappa pants you get back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
The ones with the buttons.
The one with the buttons. Always that trick at high school, weren't it? Someone would come up behind.
Again, what was your Jeff up to? Unbelievable.
It's funny though, like you mentioned about even I think I saw him make his debut when he was in Rev Pro and he didn't take off his t-shirt. And he just carried on this long tradition ever since, and he never will. He never was going to. This is who he is. And you mentioned that the kind of the state of him, but him being in a match like this, hidden on the mid card as an easy crowd pleaser, that's fine. Other lads doing the work.
It's okay. It's just a shame there's not more around them. That's the problem. But
that is it, isn't it?
JP, I was going to say though in that match, I think someone who you'd like is that Oiwa. He was a unit, weren't he?
He is. He's someone. Now this is the kind of the crux of the issue with New Japan. In some ways, like there is a shit or get off the pot moment, and really, this year's Wrestle Kingdom. I've said this, I'm sure it feels like the last 2 or 3 Wrestle Kingdoms, but this one really is the point where they've got to go with new people. They've got to try new people. They've got to try new things for the long-term business, not just the short-term here and now. And he's definitely one of them. I mean, even how they've changed their excursion style and the fact that he just went off to Noah for like tagging with Kaito Kiyomiya, but he's got a bit of personality. He's got a cracking look to him. If you think about there's him, there's Yota Tsuji. The thing I'll say about Shota,
will be one, won't they?
Youngblood definitely will be as well, and you could see them coming back in maybe when they do Tag League in December. Like it would make sense for them to come back in and around that time. I'd be absolutely fine with that. I'm trying to think of the other lad who joined Just Five Guys. Is it the lad who wears red? Oh, I can't think of his fucking name now, and it's going to escape me entirely. But there's one other lad who came back. He's got a long-term injury. And he looked good in the G1. And this is the thing. When we did any of the G1 that we watched, it was like, actually, there are snippets of stuff that is potentially good. It's not there yet. It's still a couple of years away. But you've just got to stick with it. It's just having the faith on them doing that. And I don't know if necessarily they will do it. I mean, we showed to Umino. I'm fearful that they've got an idea of putting him in the main event at the Dome. Like, that is something
I don't want it based on the booze and all that.
Which is fine if ultimately it ends up in a Naito-style story where he gets so wholeheartedly rejected by the fans and that fuels the impetus for his heel character. But I don't really have that much confidence he's going to be able to deliver on that heel character the way that Naito did when he came back. And he was just like this, like after seeing this such a bland wrestler of him then maybe coming back and doing something that's a bit more interesting. I don't know whether or not he can. I don't know if he's got it in him. No. And they're the kind of things that you become like you're a bit fearful of.
I'd say at least one good news story we got out of the show. Speaking of t-shirts, was Robbie X coming out, paying off the story the night before with the TMDK t-shirt and throwing that away. Came out in a Bullet Club t-shirt again. Not sure what says more New Japan in 2024 than that still being a thing, and he's too sweeting people and stuff like that. But leaving that aside, you'll love to see that. Like Robbie X is somebody who's been in the trenches for so long in British wrestling and has never really had that break You have to imagine, becoming a fully fledged member and team member there. Taiji Ishimori will lead to him getting some, international bookings. Will lead to him hopefully being out there in Japan a little bit more. Like that's a nice story. It's an odd thing that we're still talking Bullet Club in 2024, but that's a good little spot for him that you'd hope, like I say, pay off, whether it was a story or not. All those losses he seemed to have been doing in recent vintage in Rev Pro. Now he's going to be, a winner, unbelievably, as you said, Andy. He should be able to push on here and at least, have a nice little role for himself that he very much has earned.
Oh, I were doing cartwheels around my living room when he won last night. I was like, yes, finally, the cuss is over.
On the dog, yeah.
Yeah. No, good on him. Just see how he goes now. And what part of the Bullet Club is he part of? Rogue Army? Is that thing? He's not in the War Dogs. There's too many of them.
Well, if you think about Bullet Club these days, you've got House of Torture, then there's like Bullet Club Original, there's the War Dogs, and there's the Australian lads, which seems like
it's like 1997 Survivor Series with DOA and Nation of Domination, but bad.
It is. But what I would say about Robbie X as well is at least he can work. That's not something that is like, I mean, we think about people like, you're bringing into the mix. They're bringing in a good worker, someone who has always kind of lifted, done his end of the bargain. How he ends up being booked and whether or not he's taking losses and whatnot. If you put him in there with a match with Dookie for like what might be a standard junior title defense, if it's against him, he'll be decent. He'll live up to his end of the deal. I'd be fully confident in that. I mean, he was in CMLL not that long ago as well. And for someone who always felt like, he's on the outskirts. He didn't have that like kind of like that fashionable factor to him.
Yeah.
But that kind of made me like him even more.
Yeah, I was like, wore a mask and then he didn't wear a mask.
The mask. Yeah.
All of that stuff. He is someone who you just think, no, I'm all right with that. I'm perfectly fine with Robbie X being like kind of like a bigger deal, like in New Japan, and he's going to do all right there.
Yeah, and I will say as well before it gets lost, I thought Joe Lando and Danny Black had a good showing. I thought all of their spots with crisp looked good. I thought they would played their role well as there to do the Robbie X and obviously take the fall. They shouldn't get lost in it. I think they definitely, hopefully they impressed the right people there. But yeah, that's that really the only thing to talk is that main event. And Sanada played heel. Zack got the homecoming. He got to show off the belt. He got to do he brought it home, chanted all of that stuff. He got to play up that. Did a nice speech at the end. Wasn't quite the LIJ roll call, but brought out the TMDK lads and had a nice moment. As a homecoming. It feels genuine that he's made up. That he's, as he said himself, not the first British New Japan champion, but in his words, the first one to bring it home. As much as the match didn't necessarily excite me, and it's never going to.
Nice moment.
As a guy for him to go over. Yeah. Again, if this was part of a 2-part main event and there was a more exciting... Will Ospreay was in the box, apparently. If he was still in this world and he was on the card the second to last match, I'd be like, oh, what a great little 1-2 main event. As a standalone, wasn't much going on, but yeah, Sanada did the job, and Sabre got to have his little celebration. So it sent everyone home happy, so can't really argue too much with that. At least that side of the booking.
Yeah. No, you just hope that they find him some good opponents, really, that, leading up to the Dome and something interesting and not just the rehash of Evil and the lads and Naito.
I honestly thought at the end of this, and given the reaction to when he won the title, I think this has to be a long, substantial reign. I wouldn't be taking the belt off him at Wrestle Kingdom. I'd just be going all in that this is our guy. And
while you're rebuilding,
he is perfect, and he's also perfect for all those younger wrestlers you're going to think of as being the future of like, actually, this is the top line guy that can put in, and they're going to have a good match with, and it's going to mean something, and Zack will get the best out of them. I think that's the common sense decision in all of this. It's just Sanada. I mean, God, I was struggling not to fall asleep. Just whenever that bloke is there, it's just like, I don't know what he is. It's like there's no sleeping pill that has a bigger effect than watching Sanada wrestle. Like, I don't think there's any drug you can take that's going to make you nod off quicker than that bloke. If you put him in an Ironman match, an hour-long Ironman match, you'd be like, that's an hour's kip. I'm going to be able to get in here because he's that kind of a lad.
When you were saying about rebuilding, they've been rebuilding for about 4 or 5 years now, haven't they? It's becoming like Man United, but they've just not changed the manager yet.
Ghetto's still in place.
Ghetto's still there, yeah.
Ghetto Ten Hag.
Yeah,
that's where we are. Yeah.
Oh, but yeah. Any other notes on the show itself? I suppose. Yeah, coming out of it, bit of news. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, JP, Leo Rush did say he was gutted not to make it to Doncaster. Did make it to the country. I hope he had other bookings, because otherwise that was a bit of a waste of a journey for him coming off Dynamite on Wednesday.
I think he got to London, so hopefully he just popped into the Euston Tap for a session.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Fingers crossed. That lad could do with a little bit of luck for being charitable. But yeah, outside of that, obviously, Grizzly Young Veterans did, of course, make an appearance on the show in a little promo bit. Grit your teeth, lads. If there's anything we learn from their promos, if there's one point that they fucking drive home, it's that garbage catchphrase. It's so bad. Like they just need. It's one of those things. It's quite clear because I said it on Twitter yesterday. Get it out the way. I love Grizzly Young Veterans. I'm made up that they're doing a bit of New Japan. I'm made up that they're relatively prominent on AEW, but maybe not as prominent as I have wanted them to be recently. Maybe just give Zack Gibson the mic and let him have it himself and cut a promo in front of a crowd. Maybe that would be a solution to some of their usage in AEW. But yeah, obviously they are going to be going forward, going to be on one of the US shows with New Japan, and yeah, the promo was what it was. Grit your teeth, is what I learned.
Oh, I just want. Can I? I just
Give
want
him the mic.
I just want my Zack Gibson back. That's what I want. It's what I've wanted all along, ever since he found out he wasn't going to be in NXT. It's like, oh, we're going to get some Zack Gibson promos, and we've not had them. I don't know if he's just saying, "Nah, I'm not doing it. I've moved beyond it." It's like, mate, that's the thing that worked best for you, and you just miss it.
Oh, do you think he's just
Drake gets more promo time?
That's the thing. Is Jake just too much of a nice lad, Andy, to cut these promos? Because it's the fake intensity at the end of it. Yeah. If that was the slogan for Ride at Alton Towers, it'd probably get over in a wrestling context. You can feel the Americans just scratching their head, going, "What's he on about?" Like it's so shit. I can't believe nobody's pulled them aside to drop it.
I think one good thing he brought personality out of James Drake, but for me, since they've come back on the scene from WWE, I feel they've been coasting it. I do.
Underwhelming, aren't they?
Yeah, very underwhelming. TNA, I didn't hear any, matches that were, outstanding. AEW, they're getting beat by the comedy act.
And do you know what?
Yeah, it's just even on the British scene, they were all here for a cup of coffee, won the titles, and defended it once.
They need a home.
Pointless. Yeah,
they need a home and somewhere that they can actually get into
and get
a proper feud. Oh, well, thank God that's ending.
It's kind of that. Oh, it's more collision in it.
It is more collision, but it's like they are like, this is the problem with them, is they're not invested in any storylines that are worthwhile. So they're in there for the odd 1 or 2 shot deals in certain places, and when they are there, the matches are fine, but they're nothing really to write home about. So you come away.
They do have an AEW contract, I believe. I believe they do have one.
I mean, and this is the thing. It's just but then it feels like they're immediately being allowed to be loaned out to New Japan, and you're almost thinking, well, if AEW have got them under contract, it's not like that tag division is setting the world on fire. It's like, fucking hell, go with them. Yeah. Go, just do something with them. But it just feels like it's not happening. It's almost like they've been forgotten about already.
Because it was after Wembley, weren't it? They had that run in where you think, "All right, here we go," and they had a backstage promo with the Young Bucks, and then it was just forgotten. It's like getting beat by FTR and then get beat by the Outrunners. What were the points?
That's probably where Grit Your Teeth hit its limit for me, because there was actually there was 2 promos they cut one. put on the same episode of Dynamite, which basically was the same promo twice. I feel like they've recovered, and it did feel like they were being set up to do something, and somebody somewhere changed their mind. It's been odd, but yeah, apparently it's coming up. Obviously they were challenging the winners of the tag title match on Royal Quest. Apparently that'll be a Fighting Spirit Unleashed coming up with TMDK. It'll be so. Yeah, there we go. That's what they're doing next in New Japan. Hopefully, I'd like to see them get a. I know what you're saying, JP, about like they need a specific home, but if they were like allowed to go do a proper tag league and have a good run in New Japan proper in Japan, I think there could be something to that if you balanced it well out with like if this period while they are available for AEW have been used a little bit better, and maybe arguably they made better use of the time they've been given. I think there could have been a balance there.
I mean, we won't be covering it in intensive detail, but the tag league in December, that's the perfect place to kind of get them in there and get them a few good wins, even if they only got to the semi-finals of that tournament. So I wouldn't be expecting them to win it. Like that would be at least something where you think there's going to be like a bit of momentum, because that's what it needs at the minute. It's like they haven't got the momentum that you want them to have and that they can do, because they can deliver. These aren't things that happen like, their good stuff wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was like consistently good for a while. It's just in WWE, they were never used properly when they changed gimmick and joined a fucking incel cult. At that point, it was like, well, what the fuck are they at this point? They're just wearing fucking white contact lenses. And I don't know, are they demons? How the hell does this work? And now at this point, it feels like, I don't know, for me, like they're kind of like spinning their heels, but the potential is there. And like I said, the potential just tells Zach Gibson, oh, you're really good at promos. You're going to cut some promos. I'm not sure you want to, mate, you're cutting some promos. That's it. Yeah. End of conversation.
That's it. And while it's a regional gimmick, it got heat in NXT. I think it could work in AEW, but that's another matter. And get the other news note coming out of these shows. Apparently, AEW in New Japan. Apparently, as we get into AEW matters in a moment. Apparently, taking special steps to ensure talent are featured on shows like Forbidden Door won't immediately depart to WWE. This is Fightful Select reporting. Apparently, the situation with Stephanie Vaquer and obviously her now being on NXT week coming up has been the catalyst for it. A lot of conversation about this on our Discord today, lads. I don't really know what that really means. Does it mean anybody on a Forbidden Door show has to be contracted going forwards, or you can't have somebody like Stephanie Vaquer? Because I think the issue with there was the backdoor route. She had a CMLL contract, but if WWE came calling, she was allowed to go and negotiate. Like, I don't really know how you plug that gap, but yeah, this is something obviously New Japan adjacent that Fightful Select have been reporting. If you had any big takes on it, JP?
I just think they've got to be more careful in terms of who they use. I mean, you wouldn't blame Stephanie Vaquer for choosing like WWE over AEW, given the current landscape and everything else. There's much more of a future for her in WWE, and a future for her getting to the main roster as well. And I remember your comments on Andy when you saw her when she was over for was it Fantastica Mania?
Fantastica Mania. She were against Kanji again. Perfect opponent. She looked like a star then.
Exactly.
Instantly.
I did also want to see Kanji and Danny Luna in Stardom. I think that would add a bit of interest in the mix. I think they'd be perfect for little excursions over there. But yeah, it's a funny one. They have to make sure, because particularly if you think for next year's Forbidden Door, because it's in London, you're going to have AEW, so there's going to be people under contract there, and that should be absolutely fine. New Japan, people under contract, because it isn't when the contracts run out in January, so it's going to be in August. So we've got there's plenty of time, so everyone will be under contract. CMLL, you're not really in control of, but you'd like to think that the people that are using it, whether it be someone like La Catalina, who's been built up as their next kind of like female star, recently given win over Toni Storm. But then I think the fourth element to that might be Rev Pro, and that's a different kettle of fish then at that stage, because Rev Pro, it doesn't have it doesn't have the finances to offer people guaranteed contracts and things like that. So there is always the potential you could kind of lose people. So I don't know whether or not that would affect that side of things, because you also know that WWE would do things to put spanners in works, wouldn't they? Because that's how they kind of operate. Do they need Stephanie Vicaire? Not necessarily, even though I think it's a very good pickup for them. So, yeah, I think this is one where they're just going to be a bit more careful about who they put on the card, but then they should be that about all the matches they put on all their pay-per-views the rest of the year. But that's AEW for you. You just don't really fucking know, do you?
That's it. But before we let you go, Andy, any other thoughts on New Japan, your weekend as a whole? Glad you made your trip to Doncaster at least. Glad you didn't go to Royal Quest. Is that the headline? I think we're all feeling that way.
Yeah. I enjoyed the Donny show. It was a good day out. We found a good couple of boozers along the way. So yeah, no,
not those cash only pubs that you were talking about. That
no, the one near the station that were like that. Straight in, straight out. I know.
Fighting pub, I'm assuming.
Yeah. He's Doncaster anyway, isn't it? So it will be a fighting pub. But yeah, no, glad I went there. Glad I didn't go to New Japan. It's dead.
Yeah. Speaking of which, glad to get you on to talk some Brit Res. We needed the expert on. We are not the experts when it comes to Brit Res. I don't think we ever were. It's very much you and your Jeff. People should definitely check out your full review of Global Wars on the now back to Graps and Claps feed out there. Very much enjoyed. I was listening to that while walking around with the Greg's coffee this afternoon, and it all felt very British. Very much enjoyed it. Good to get an update on your Jeff. It'll be up and about sooner rather than later with you at shows again very soon, I'd imagine.
Yeah, fingers crossed it'll stop me walking the dog for a change. Like I said, he probably wanted to do my leg in as well, so to matching set with our Jeff. But yeah, no, been great to be on. Just a couple of plugs. Go and follow the podcast at GCP Podcast 1. Myself at Oggy Part 3. I'm also on Nothing Can Like It with Kieran and Eddie Sideburns.
Oh, that's great.
At FWA Pod. Next episode's British Uprising 2, and a plug as well for Ben Corrigan's huge thread on it today.
Oh, I saw that, yeah, about them, but because that's the show where they get kicked out of York Hall, isn't it? Because the flame. It is, yeah. Mikey Whiplash, Rick Rap, and all of that. But before Whiplash's time, yeah, it's fuck me, like the user chronicling the history, and it's like it's an important job. Somebody has to do it. But going back and watching those shows, you're a better man than me. Although Uprising 2 got some good memories of. That is one that I think at the time I was thinking of going to myself.
Yeah, no, it's been an excellent journey, like going watching it, and like a lot of the stuff I haven't watched before, so it's all pretty fresh to me. But I think from the last episode, it's you can sort of tell it maybe on the way down. But you know, we found out the story of if Steve Linsky stole that ring in Blackburn. So we're solving mysteries as ever. And one final thing. I'm 1500th in the world on FPL, so
I was gonna say we missed doing it at FPL Club at this international break, mainly because I'd forgotten and I hadn't checked my team in about 2 weeks, which is the difference in our season so far, Andy. When you're doing bad, it's like I don't care about this FPL stuff anymore. But when you're doing good, and you are doing very good, this is Mr. Chip's greatest season. Like you are. What number? Where are you right now in the
1,000? Because of Chris Wood's goal tonight, I'm 1,572 in the world.
It's insane.
Jesus.
If we don't find any other reason to do another FPL club before
all chips gone
Christmas, we'll do it before the slide happens, Andy. Before the Christmas break, and everyone starts.
Before they've all had the turkey, like
it's working for you right now. Though going though hard, that's working for you as well. It is unbelievable, as Elliot says here in the chat, mate. Can you keep it up? That's the challenge.
I might go down RGS route and do -8s and -12s like he's been telling us. So
runs in the family, doesn't it?
He does.
Oh, brilliant. But no, you deserve the victory lap for that. But yeah, we're going to get into some AEW and WWE matters. Obviously, people can hear you as well in the pre-show. We talked a bit about your house show experience with WWE this week as well. We should, of course, plug Muck as well with you and Matty. For people who don't know, you and Matty, what episode are you up to in that season?
Yeah.
Shite was the original season.
Yes.
The season currently in. Big Show was the last show.
Yeah, so we done Extreme Big Show, which was Volume 5. and we've got 2 episodes left. One's Volume 6, which is Roman Reigns versus King Corbin's feud. It's all about dog food. And then we're doing a Christmas special where we're bringing on Michael Amflet from What Culture you had on quite a few times. So we're going to do ITV Celebrity Wrestling episode 1 and 8.
God.
That's some muck if I ever heard it.
That really is.
So got that coming up, but always a pleasure to record with you lads.
Brilliant, mate. We'll have you on again soon, if not for anything but to brag about that FPL result. But yeah, definitely follow Andy Oggy Part 3 GCP Podcast 1 on Twitter and everywhere else.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Andy.
Cheers, Andy.
Bye.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
And with that said, JP, we've got a bit of news to bomb through before we do get out of here. There's a fair amount going on with some breaking news tonight as well, coming out of all things AEW and WWE. Maybe get a bit of Maple Leaf Pro in at the end as well. But yeah, we just talked New Japan and AEW and the Forbidden Door contracts. We obviously on the weekend show this week talked quite a bit on Dynamite this week and the follow up to WrestleDream. I'd say if I was going to sum it up, I think you were probably the more negative of the two of us, and I was mixed. And then by the end of the conversation, was probably just as negative on the follow up to WrestleDream this week. But obviously, big Dynamite coming up on Wednesday, or at least we can say one good thing about AEW in this period. They do seem to at least have the shit together as far as promoting stuff goes. Whether that necessarily paid off on Dynamite this week with promoting the main event of the very show, as we talked about on the pre-show. But they did that. At least they've done a job of setting up the card for this coming week's Dynamite. So yeah, we got that to talk about. Obviously, I suppose coming off WrestleDream. I mean, just I suppose Cliff Notes, JP. How are you feeling post the WrestleDream lull? I feel like the not podcasters curse, but podcasters reward. I will say there have been some news stories coming out that apparently plans were changed for WrestleDream, which I'll give us credit, JP. I reckon we were the first to point out that felt the way. Apparently, it was intended to be Darby Allin that was going to be beating Bryan Danielson for the title at WrestleDream. That story's come out as well. Obviously, they changed gears and went with this Moxley era, and now I presume we're going to circle back around to Darby Allin. But yeah, what do you make of that news story? And this I suppose obviously all very much push forward with Bryan Danielson's real life neck issues, which do seem to be a big factor in and why WrestleDream went the way it did. But yeah, thoughts on the follow up and thoughts on what we could have had.
Do you know what? I think if they'd gone with Darby Allin beating him, it wouldn't have been. I mean, yeah, we've got a hometown pop, but I don't know if necessarily I would have liked it. I think I'm more inclined to say that I prefer this direction that they're necessarily going in. It's just a disjointed way it happened. Which was the first thing that you had said for this. It was like, this just feels like they've changed everything around as a result. They just put these kind of plans into the mix. And it turns out you're completely spot on. One of which about Bryan not being able to go anymore, because obviously the story is that he's having an MRI to assess his neck damage, and he may have to go undergo surgery, which means obviously even if the next time he does make his what will turn out to be very sporadic appearances wrestling, it's not going to be for a long time. I suspect it might not even be until we get to All In Texas. I think that might be when they're kind of looking to perhaps bring him back, if even if he's going to be ready for that. And there's no guarantee with that with a neck injury. Them going with Darby Allin, yeah, it would have had the hometown pop. I understand the reasons why. I understand like there's a logic to it, and it's not that I entirely disagree with the logic. It's just that I don't feel that the kind of it wouldn't have worked for me. Now, it's not to say it wouldn't work, but it's not something that instinctively, if you ask me, Darby Allin, AEW champion, it's like I prefer to see Orange Cassidy in that role before him. If I'm going to be brutal, I think that's someone who feels like, to say earned it more, but it feels like that would be he's a much more organic character to kind of put into that mix. Whereas Darby Allin, like we've not had this yet. I mean, Orange Cassidy's headlined a pay-per-view against Moxley and kind of proven that he can do it and live up to it from like a work rate perspective as well. Again, Darby Allin has memorable matches and memorable moments, but does he have those kind of world champion moments? I'm not convinced by that. I have to say it instinctively. So I think going with Moxley in the end is a better idea. And it felt like after the angle, after WrestleDream, it was all very much building up to, oh, now we're having the big chase with Darby Allin. But again, it's whether or not is it going to fizzle out. I don't know, because I'm a bit kind of confused by where they're going to end up going with this, and we'll know more about it when we get to Dynamite this week. But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
It says to me like that story feels like it's given away their hand. That I think we heard the rumors around All In. Darby Allin's going to be next, and it's like going into that, it was a really like, have you done the legwork to get him to that point? So you have obviously had the title shot in his back pocket, but it's a very AEW thing to do, isn't it? Just randomly go, okay, now Darby Allin's going to be the next guy in line, and it's not necessarily been backed up by the booking and the placement of him, but it does feel from the TV, with the weekend and the TV midweek with Dynamite last week, that they are trying to put these baby faces in position. They're trying to establish that it's going to be like this motley crew of Orange Cassidy. Daniel Garcia is very much the face of it. Private Party obviously involved in a lot of those BCC angles on Dynamite last week. That they're going to be, I think they're going to be at least the first line of defense, and then at some point Darby's going to play Sting, isn't he? And he's going to come in and he's going to be the the foil for Moxley. And I wouldn't shock me if sooner rather than later they go with that, and they go with Moxley dropping the belt to Darby, which is, if the story is to be believed, it is the reason they went with it. They wanted to heat up the BCC angle and put Moxley in that position. But whether that means more for Darby than a win directly over Bryan, or whether it necessarily something that they've earned with Darby's placement on the show, I'm not so sure going forward. But interesting bit of news to get. Did you make any notes of the of Collision or Battle of the Belts this weekend? I haven't got much to say on them. They were shows that existed. It was a 3-hour collision essentially this weekend. Tight enough, solid enough wrestling shows for wrestling shows' sake.
Yes.
But they did exist.
I crammed in 3 hours of wrestling, and I thought to myself, if I hadn't seen these, would I have been all right? Would I have survived? But it's not to say that they were bad, because they weren't necessarily bad. It's just, because it was a pretty jam-packed collision. I'm looking on here, and it was somewhere in the region of, between both of them, if you're talking about the 3-hour block, including Battle of the Belts, which I almost just refuse to say exists, and it won't exist for too much
Probably
longer.
won't going forward.
As a 3-hour collision, it was like the most B show pay-per-view in the world, wasn't it? You had 9-10 matches in there, but not necessarily a whole lot of substance. It's still very much like a B show. When Collision was being when it was like Top Flight and Action Andretti, for the trios titles, and I just thought, oh my God, trios titles should have been the first thing that John Moxley rails against. Going, too many fucking titles. I'd have been like, you'd have won me round. He won me round with the 150 wrestlers under contract. Oh, they would have been complete baby faces if they just trashed those and goes, why are we even bothering with this shite? But I thought, as a show, it was generally okay. It was, it's fine. This weird stuff, LFI with Jake Roberts, I just don't understand what the fuck that is about. They don't need him. They just don't need him. Roosh as a pushed heel, upper mid card heel commodity with a couple of lads behind him, including his brother and the lad in there. And then I got confused by Beast Mortis, who's part of that stable, but then is also eating meat in the segments with bloody Undisputed Kingdom, who are now just complete comedy geek fodder as well. Stuff like that. That kind of, it almost encapsulates what a lot of the issues that AEW has with their stories, where it still involves too many people, too many stables, and it can get a bit kind of confusing. But I do want to give a shout out for Harley Cameron, who I do think is getting better in ring. She's not great, but don't get me wrong, I'm not going to lose the plot on this, but she is quite funny. She does have good comic timing. I'll give her that. There is perhaps the genesis of a constant comedy character that she does portray quite well. But should that be what I come out of Collision talking about? No, that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be like sort of top of the list. You know,
Mm.
I was looking at a card and I was going, fuck me, mate. We are a world away from your great run, aren't we? We're going through the motions. And that's kind of where we are. And are we going to be this way until the new year with Collision? That it's just going to be going through the motions until the new deal kicks in and they're going to treat that as the reboot? Feels like it.
It deserves about as much time as we give it, which is probably more than we should. The only thing I did give credit for this week, I very much enjoyed Ricochet and AR Fox. I did think they did a good job. It was a good match. AR Fox reminded you why he was a push commodity at one point in AEW before last year's All In and the debacle with his visa or whatever it was. That was probably one of the better Ricochet performances, I think, in AEW so far. Very much worth checking out that. But yeah, outside of it, it was a collision. It was a battle of the belts. It is what it is at this point. And on that point, obviously, we have Dynamite coming up this week. Matches we've got as maligned on the pre-show by some of us. Sammy Guevara is working Shelton Benjamin. Mark Briscoe, who was a lot better on Dynamite, by the way, than I think any of us expected. I very much enjoyed him, at least week one, playing mini Brock Lesnar. That was good. Mark Briscoe v Chris Jericho was obviously set up on Dynamite last week. Jack Perry and the Young Bucks against Daniel Garcia and Private Party to pay off the weird side story where Fortune and Immortal aren't getting on. Sorry, the Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite are button heads. We have Queen Amanita at least getting a follow-up match on Dynamite this week against Camille, which is good to have. I think at least as we said in our Dynamite review, want to see more of Queen Amanita in a prominent position on these Dynamites. House of Black is still a thing, so we're getting them on Dynamite this week, and we're also getting Kyle Fletcher on the show as well. We're probably going to cut another You People promo about how we don't deserve an explanation, presumably a setup for Ospreay to come back on the fold on this week's show.
They just did that storyline with Mariah May, though, didn't they? Doesn't want to do a championship celebration. It's like he hasn't got the chops on the mic. He can pull the faces. He can do the requisite tone that's required. I'm just not convinced by Carl Fletcher. He's done the work in the gym. I was thinking to myself about when we first saw him, and it's just how ridiculously skinny he was with his long hair. You look at him now; he's looking like fucking Brock Lesnar. The fucking size of him, it's insane. I have to say, it's not a Dynamite that necessarily fills me full of enthusiasm. I'm not convinced there's going to be some great thing appearing necessarily on this episode of Dynamite that's going to make me massively excited. I don't know what they can do at this stage other than this, I suppose, the little building blocks that are going to come about. But this is the issue. The whole thing depends. The one thing that hasn't been announced, but you know they're going to be there, is what is Moxley doing? Because that is going to be effectively the driving force for all of the major stories. So whatever they're doing is going to almost dictate how I feel about the show. Because if they're doing stuff and it feels substantial, then I'll be like more on board with it. Up to this point, it feels like what has been like a sort of standard episode of Dynamite that we've seen in recent weeks. So be prepared for more happy, cheery JP goodness on the weekend show this week.
Well, there you go. If you want our full thoughts on Dynamite last week, that was we did cover it on the weekend show. It was the primary things. You got an hour of it over there, but it is a positive thing to say. As Simon says that they are announcing these cards in advance. You know, pushing the show in a couple of weeks, building up to Shelton Benjamin and Swerve. Whatever you think of Shelton Benjamin in a prominent spot in 2024. Like I said on the pre-show, I don't fully think this is. TNA revisited. I would have Shelton Benjamin, at least based on that Dynamite performance last week. I think there's possibly a role he can play going forward. But it's good to at least have a bit of build there.
It does. And can I also say as well, one thing I did enjoy actually from Battle of the Belts, or I should say Collision really, was Brian Cage and Lance Archer as just a massive bloke tag team. I've a soft spot for that, but there was a spot they did to Jack Cartwheel. I think Brian Cage held him up for a power bomb, and Lance Archer just grabbed him as a choke slam that going on with him that looked like he would fucking kill you. And it was like I did enjoy that, and I think they nearly killed the other lad, Brian Cruz. In the meantime, I was like, yeah, a bit of that kind of stuff is very much my cup of tea. So you never know. They might. Brian Cage might be and Lance Archer might be the saviors of the tag division in AEW. Who can tell?
We'll see. Well, switching over to all things WWE, got a few news stories, and I would say a notable SmackDown we had this week. Obviously, Raw is tonight, so we'll keep our thoughts limited on that. But yeah, it wasn't just the Trump on the Undertaker podcast, which is the media that covering WWE this week. There's been a few mainstream kind of things going on. Fucking Maven on Piers Morgan was a thing that happened this week. We got that. Obviously, there was the much more serious matter of the Rolling Stone article on Vince McMahon and the bullying culture backstage at WWE. Very much would recommend that, worthwhile a read. Obviously notable. A lot of the writers asked to remain nameless in this piece, but it was a lot of the stories I think we all kind of know about WWE and about what it's the culture of being a writer in Vince McMahon's WWE has been this whole while. 20 odd years of them having that structure. And yeah, they were all kind of stories that I think, those who are tuned in have heard before. But yeah, interesting to get picked up by a mainstream outlet here, JP. And obviously, yeah, Rolling Stone definitely brought some attention to it in a positive way as much as in a negative way. That Piers Morgan show with fucking Vince Russo and Maven, and the stage management that they did on that thing to give you your nice little salacious moment at the end. Was maybe the negative end of mainstream coverage of this story.
Yeah, the Piers Morgan stuff felt like this needed to be a couple of weeks ago. Strike while the iron's hot, and instead it was just like a piece of basically filler TV. Where it was really weird because it was like they were being quite harsh about the culture in WWE and not being able to say no, and how they were being spoken to by Vince McMahon. And then the moment that Phil Mushnick appeared, they just completely turned on him. And it was
so
like
weird.
It was like, right, this is the
like
originator of the guy who was it was just like he was the one who was exposing Vince McMahon for who he is. But somehow he's become like the hate figure in all of this. And it's just like, you're literally just trying to shoot the messenger here. You're just ignoring the message, even if the message he is reporting on, you completely agree with. It made no sense whatsoever when they were doing that. Because I thought when it started off, when hearing Coachman talk and Maven talk and Charlie Caruso, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Vince Russo, I just kind of switch off on. And then just the way they turned on Mushnick, it was like, Phil Mushnick is not what the problem with WWE and the culture in WWE. That can't be you can't be blaming him for that. He's not at fault for that.
He was like the number 2 babyface outside of Meltzer on the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, because he felt like he was the one who was saying truth to power. He was the one who's going, no, sorry, like this is the stuff that's going on, and he was the only one who was able to report on it. And simply because he's not a wrestling person, he's the one who gets the grief. And I don't understand it. It's just absolutely like it's bollocks. It's like almost, or you can't talk about this because you've not worked for the company. Was it Coachman says something? You've not been backstage at a WWE event. It's just like, no, but that's not also what journalists do. They're not in the dressing room of a Premier League team to know what's going on at a Premier League team. They are like, they're going to be fed stories and they're going to verify, and then they're going to report on those stories. And that's what Mushnick's doing. Whether you like him or not is kind of almost irrelevant for this, but it's the idea of Mushnick being the kind of like the hate figure. I was just like, what the fuck is this about?
Yeah, it was just Vic say it, and he was absolutely right. It was just watching a lot of WWE mouthpieces and Maven among them, who I had a lot of time for when he first started his YouTube channel, just saying things Vince would say, about Mushnick and about him being, a con man and not a proper journalist and all of this stuff. But it was like I say, I don't expect any better from Piers Morgan. It was the stage management. We got this surprise guest. It was like watching fucking Maury or like one of those early 90s talk shows where they talk about like the steroid trials. So guess who we've got behind door number 2? Look, it's Pat Patterson, or whatever they do. Like, just it was bollocks, and it was the negative side of it. But I do want to draw attention to the Rolling Stone article. Not a lot new in there for people like us, but I'm glad it was out there. Got to put the word out. And my big takeaway from that was it reminded you that, we've got this under the WWE section because it's not just a Vince McMahon story, it's a WWE story. And what of the Janelle Grant I've been saying, consistently as well. Yes, Vince is gone. And I think wrestling fans want to be like, bad man gone, we move on, and the culture has changed. Read that article, because a lot of it's about middle management carrying out the wishes of Vince, and middle management doing a lot of the bullying, and middle management, treating the individual writers like shit, and a lot of like the defense on the Vince McMahon side, who when asked for comment, did respond to Rolling Stone, was like, Vince never said that. Vince never said that rule. Vince never did that. But it was a lot of people acting on his behalf. And yes, Vince is gone. But a lot of the people you could probably read into that, or who those people are, Vince's old friends. There's a lot of his old friends who are still in the company. I'm not saying other people unnamed in the article, but, Bruce Pritchard is still knocking around. Michael Hayes is still knocking around. There's a lot of those ghosts of the past. There was no big Weinstein-like cull of all of this, like, culture of abuse and culture of bullying and just toxic workplace that have obviously, to people like us who've been following it closely, WWE has been. None of that happened, and a lot of those people are still in place, and you can put the shiny face on. Uncle Paul's in charge now, and bad man gone, and everything's great. But yeah, it's still the same company on the inside, and yeah, not a lot outside of what Kevin Dunn. Who else has actually left who was of note during the Vince years? Like, it's not exactly been a full clear out.
Not from the writing side. I think it feels like most of them are there, aren't they? I mean, it is a very good / horrible read. Like, it's both of those things. Like, you're not, again, we're not surprised by it. This is always the stuff. It just feels like these things are now being made much more public and much more mainstream in the way that they haven't been before. But that culture is still very much in place. Those guys have just learned how to keep quiet within it. Just the amount of stories you hear. There was that one guy who worked there. I want to say Michael Leonardi. I want to say that they kind of like they bring up.
That was the one name, yeah.
He works there, and then it's just like, oh no, this is absolutely awful, and he ends up leaving, and then he comes back, and then it's just the idea of the old stuff about tearing up Raw scripts on the day of. His mistake was refusing to do, what was it, a segment with on Martin Luther King Day, where he wanted Neville to say, "I have a dream," and that's winning at WrestleMania, I think, or something along those lines. It's an obviously fucking stupid and insensitive thing to do that Vince is doing because he can, for no other reason than this is what I can do. And Neville didn't want to do it. And so the writer goes and says, actually, we're not going to do this. And it's just like, oh, you're saying no to me. And that's his card marked. And all of these stories, like, these are the stories that you've heard from a variety of writers. It brings up the writer who recently is in the lawsuit. She was the only black woman in the writer's room. And the kind of levels of abuse that she received, just the fucking childishness of it, absolutely childish. Because the problem is with this middle management culture that you mentioned, is it's so much about them protecting what they see as their spots, and they've got complete Stockholm syndrome. So they believe that this is the way you act in a workplace. And some of the stuff they said, it was just like, if you or I said that at work, we're gone. We're gone for gross misconduct. There's no fucking around. We are out the door because it is just not acceptable. So if you are able to read it, then like it's a very good read, but it's horrible. But it won't tell, probably for a lot of our audience and the people who are watching and listening to this, anything you didn't already know. But it just sort of confirms it. So when you think of Janelle Grant, like you said, this is the culture that is very much in place and needs to go.
Another quick do they be news, one that broke this evening. Samantha Irvin is leaving WWE. She wrote a lengthy goodbye on both her Twitter and her Instagram, saying her time has come to an end as the Monday Night Raw ring announcer. Basically thanked, it seems like, everybody from the locker room to the crew, the cameraman, name checking a lot of people in there. Road Dogg, Scott Armstrong, Gabe Sapolsky, Michael Paul Heyman, speaking of which, Michael P.S.A.'s, Michael Cole, Mark Henry even got a name check in there, as well as going through all the different departments there, and just ended it with saying, we are meant to be, and I can prove it, stay tuned. Talking about a career. She says, all my love, and still, Samantha. it's got a lot of people just assuming she might be headed somewhere where a certain King Ricochet is, and I don't think it's Maple Leaf Pro JP. I mean, it could be one of those, couldn't it, where it was like, eventually happened with Renee, but a lot of us expected her to be heading straight to AEW when she left WWE, and it didn't happen. So maybe there's something else going on there, but it's certainly the obvious consideration point.
I think so, because if I'm right in thinking, Dasha Fuentes has gone. So they've got someone else who's doing the ring announcing alongside Justin Roberts. And I would see people give her stick and abuse. And I honestly, to God, I could never understand why. I was like, she's perfectly fine. She's a fucking ring announcer, for God's sake. I don't have the ultimate expectations. Was she able to say the names right? Yeah. Was she able to kind of do like a good, like kind of vocal performance? Yeah. Can she even do what Lillian Garcia could do and sing? Yeah, she can. She'd be a thoroughly good pickup for them in that area. It's like whether or not really do they need another ring announcer? Probably not. But I couldn't help but feel when I heard about this story, it's like, oh no, that's where she's going. Like that's the sensible, logical step.
Feels odd though, because she feels so embedded to what this WWE is now. Like, obviously, the thing people are going to remember is a crime when Cody won the belt at WrestleMania this year. She's known for that, isn't she? And she's known for those emotive calls, and she's known for being part of this WWE kind of ecosystem and part of this babyface version, as we just talked about, of Bad Man Gone WWE. So yeah, it does feel a bit odd that that's been allowed to happen. Steph saying there in the chat, yeah, huge mistake if she's left to go to AEW. Feels a strange one, but again, if Ricochet's over there, maybe that's part of what's play there, or maybe it's something wild that she'll end up on. Like what was her name? Charlie Caruso, who was on the Piers Morgan show, end up being a talking head on a news channel or something. Who knows? But yeah, definitely want to cause it by surprise.
It could be as well, and sometimes we don't ever factor into consideration. It could be, and this is God. I'm really projecting here. It may not be the case. I might just be, projecting my own situation. It could be things like wanting to just not travel, go on the road, start a family. All of these kind of aspects of real life that maybe she wants to do for the time being. And being in WWE doesn't really allow you to do that. You have to permanently be on the road and on the go. And I think there's just that element of burnout that could be playing a factor massively into that. But I still expect to see her in AEW. that doesn't change.
Just guaranteed, don't it? Another quick WWE news story. NXT confirmed for the former ECW arena, the 2300 arena in Philly. That will be a Wednesday show for those keeping track. They are being shunted that week due to the US election, which obviously, as we talked about earlier, polls are closing on the 5th. Remember the 5th of November. But yeah, that means NXT is on a Wednesday, so we have a Wednesday night war coming up. JP and Sean and the lads are going to be coming live from the ECW arena. Who thought this would be where Shawn Michaels would make, to my recollection, his ECW arena debut? And he's going to come out at some point during this show. Triple H in the ECW arena, that's another one, isn't it? What a weird thing. You'd imagine they'll try and stack that and go head to head with AEW on that Wednesday.
Oh, I fully expect to see Paul Heyman on here. I fully expect there to be some really quite badly worked hardcore matches as well in the meantime. I'm fully expecting all of those kind of shenanigans to happen in the meantime. If they don't happen, I'd be absolutely amazed. I mean, it just feels wrong. It feels wrong that they're there. And it's a very low rent building by the looks of it. Like, I mean, I've never been there live, but for what they want out of a production of this, it feels like they'd have to do almost like what would be basically the WWECW version of what the ECW arena is, isn't it? It's going to be that kind of, it's like ECW again. And it's like, yeah, I'm afraid that, Kalani Jordan and Sol Rooker doesn't exactly spell to me like kind of like classic ECW, but it'll be a novelty.
It'll be later ECW.
Yeah,
but
it will be.
It just feels a bit like it's like in the after the death of ECW, all those indie. It almost felt like ROH always treated the ECW arena like it was beneath them until they did the CZW feud. Like, and eventually, obviously, they did run shows there, but it was like every fucking CZW knockoff XPW, hardcore pro wrestling, the new ECW company would run there. It felt so low rent, like, oh, you're trying to grab something that's very clearly gone and dead. And WWE have always, even when they brought ECW back, acted like they were above running that arena. It's quite a thing for it to come full circle. And babyface Paul and Sean, to use it as a Wednesday night show, and to put it opposite AEW and maybe capture some of that nostalgia for the arena. They'll be running like video packages for it and promoting that they are there and the history of the building and stuff like that. Maybe you'll get a rando who's going to be the ECW original who gets like a one-off here, a Rob Van Dam or somebody like that. They're going to pull somebody else, aren't they? It's going to, whoever they can think of who's like the least unproblematic and the least dead, they'll find them and they'll be wheeling them out.
Least dead will be a tricky one. Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer, they can get a loan of him for a night. They're taking everyone else from TNA, so fuck it, why not him? They'll be able to do that. But yeah, do you know what though? What I would say is they'll make it look good, and it'll just confirm to my mind, why isn't Dynamite in these smaller, more niche arenas around the place where you can get like a lively atmosphere and
beat Tony Khan to it? Yeah, I would have thought that'd be a big one, wouldn't it? Going back to the arenas he used to drag his dad to as a kid.
Imagine that. Imagine you're a billionaire and you've been stood in that place with those sweaty bastards. Like, fuck me. I bet he just thought, Cottage. I need to have a word. Craven Cottage is not full of sweaty bastards, I have to say.
Too fair, yeah.
It is a prawn sandwich crowd for that one.
Yeah. Oh, well, there we go. So yeah, they're beating AEW to it, and yeah, last WWE note. Obviously, Raw is tonight. Won't waste too much time going through that. Obviously, it's in a couple of hours. People have probably seen it by the time tomorrow morning hits. But did watch SmackDown on Friday, and I'll defend Matty in that it was a good little show SmackDown this Friday if you just count the angles. The matches were all right, but yeah, they did obviously Motor City Machine Guns had their big debut on WWE TV. It was weird because obviously we talked about it on Weekend Show going in. They pretty much made it clear that they were the mystery team who were coming into this weird three-way tag edition of SmackDown, only for them to just on Twitter be like, oh, by the way, it's most of the Machine Guns. And they posted like this video of them with Nick Aldis looking 37 feet tall stood next to them, signing them to contracts. And it was almost like, I don't know, maybe they didn't think with their audience, and we've seen it happen with Punk, where there's some crowds that knew him and some crowds that seemed a bit of a stranger to him in this modern new WWE in his early days of his comeback. Maybe they didn't want to take any chances and have the big surprise be met with a big wet fart of a pop. So yeah, they made it clear it was them. They outright advertised it, and then yeah, we got the match on SmackDown. I will say it wasn't much of a match. It just we kind of existed to put them over. I think they'll obviously have more to do this coming week when they are in there with what you call it, the nerds, Triple H's favourites, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. But Gargano and Ciampa, obviously, as they've said, look up to Motor City Machine Guns. They're going to want to go out there and have something at least resembling, a mid-2000s Motor City Machine Guns match. But yeah, it did. It was a nice moment to see. It was like, oh, cool, Alex Shelley. Unless you remember as one off in NXT that time when he teamed with Kushida, actually getting a WWE run, and Chris Sabin, being there and getting his moment in the sun as well. We can make all the jokes about their age and where it took this long for them to get there, but it's a nice moment at least that they're getting this run, and I think it's probably in the wake of Lucha Brothers contract falling through. But yeah, never thought I'd see it. 2024 Motor City Machine Guns with full name, not quite full theme, on a SmackDown.
Yeah, it was. What was it that Corey Graves had said? It was your favorite tag team's favorite tag team was the point.
Probably accurate to be fair, but yeah, brings back a few. Yeah, that line. Wonder where they got that. Anyway,
great footwork. But it's a funny. Funny enough, when I saw this match, I just thought I could see them in a very long, extended feud with DIY because they're similar sized guys who can have kind of decent TV matches.
They love best of sevens, as noted by this week's SmackDown. Best of 25s, it feels like at this point, but you could see them being good opponents for them. I didn't really think of them when they came in. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense actually.
It does, doesn't it? And this is almost like this is a nice sort of career ender, particularly for Alex Shelley, for someone who had effectively quit and was wrestling very, very part time because he was physical therapy, wasn't he? He trained as a physical therapist, and it's like
yeah.
that,
He
his
prioritized
good,
that for the most part.
and his good work. And I know you've always been high on Alex Shelley. You'd always said about Generation Next that this was the guy they need to go, and they went with Austin Aries instead. Could be getting my Ring of Honor lore mixed up there, but that always seemed to be the case. But you kind of look at them and you think, really, what is this? In some ways, it reminds you of when, I'll say, bringing in AJ Styles. It's the same thing, but it's like it's a good career-ending run where they can make some seriously good money on the main roster. They'll have decent tag team matches. I won't have the highest of hopes. I don't expect them kind of having long title reigns and everything else. I expect them to win the titles, and they'll be around on TV, and they won't shit the bed, and they're absolutely fine. In this era of WWE, where these smaller guys are not going to be treated as like a complete joke or fodder for a great Carly style character to come in and squash them, they're perfect.
They're immediately in the top end of tag teams in WWE. Like, whether that says about WWE or not, I don't know. But as far as like match wise, I don't expect them to, completely change the face of the division, but they're going to be in the upper echelon of like matches for whatever they're with in modern WWE programming. I think they're going to be a reliable hand, and I reckon they've probably been brought in for this to be this veteran team to fill a slot, and I think they'll do well enough that they'll end up being, like has happened before, Triple H's boys. And I reckon they'll have it won't just be like a nice little gold watch moment. I could see them having a nice little run for at least a couple of years here. It feels like a good home for them. And Shelley is someone, you're right, I've always been high on as a singles act. Maybe that ship has sailed, but you never know, something might come of that as well. But definitely a nice thing to see. Outside of that, on SmackDown, the Bloodline drama, do need to mention it was actually a good week for that, to be fair. Jey Uso turning up on SmackDown. There was a fucking great moment when he Jacob Fatu was like staring a hole at him, and he looked right back at Jacob. I feel like I'm Massey here, JP. Look right back at Jacob Fatu. It was something along that lines of, keep staring at me like that, and me and you are gonna have a problem. And the crowd went fucking bonkers for it, as they do every moment in this story, capital letters that we have. And obviously at the end of the show was again Roman and mid-card Jim being beaten up by the new bloodline with no help from Jay, so they get to stringing the story out. But as far as stringing that story out, the SmackDown was a good one, and obviously it's most likely being paid off. I'm sure people will know by now, with Jey Uso probably losing his Intercontinental title on Raw. Apparently Roman's proud of him. I think that brought a tear to Matty's eye when that segment aired on SmackDown as well. But presumably, if they cost him the belt, goes back to Bron Breakker, and then he gets back with the lads, Sami Zayn becomes the last shoe to drop, unless Rock's getting involved, which would be something for the Survivor Series builds. But they're doing the steps we all imagine them to do, and to be honest, this week's SmackDown was a good example of why everyone's so invested in it. There were a couple of good segments.
Hey, it's Uncle Paul booking 101. And do you know what? For a story like this, it's exactly what it needs. Because even I, waking up on the Saturday, I thought, I should actually, because it came up on my YouTube feed, and I thought, I should have a look at some of these. I want to see how Motor City Machine Gun's debut looked. And then I found myself watching the Bloodline bits. And I went, this shit's over. It's over. And it gets the kind of requisite reactions. And I'm fine with it, because I'm not as emotionally invested. But for them, this is like the common sense business thing for them to do for this. And I thought they played the Jey Uso stuff actually quite well. Even from the point of him arriving, like just teasing it out a bit. And it's just like, but that's what you should do. You should be teasing this
when they get
until
back
you get to
together.
War Games. Yeah.
We always said it, they're the moments company, and they're very much the story company at this point. One story that couldn't be sold on, though, from the last note on SmackDown this week, Cody Rhodes trying to sell him and Gunther as being the equivalent of, I think he said, Steve Austin and Goldberg meeting. He's bringing up all these historic comparisons of NWA champions going against WWF champions. Like, not quite the same, mate. It's SmackDown versus Raw, but he tried. He gave it all the gravitas you'd imagine a very faux, sincere, suited and booted Cody Rhodes would attempt to give a story like this. Not sure if he achieved it, but we'll see if we can make that mean something.
We didn't mention it earlier on. We were speaking about these two fuckers behind me for video viewers of Undertaker and Trump having their conversation. But one of the things that Undertaker, who's like the modern stars these days, second name he brought, he was like Roman Reigns, Gunter. And I just thought, Jesus Christ, like, what did Donald Trump make of that? He probably thought of that kid from The Simpsons. Like, you could imagine him thinking like that, wouldn't he?
Taker brought up CM Punk earlier on. You could see Trump nod like he knew who that was as well. Ugh, I'm sure Punk loved that. Jesus.
Imagine if Trump had said, "I'm a big fan of his IWA Mid-South days as well." Probably thinking that would somehow appeal to swing voters in Indiana or something like that. But yeah, I have to say I didn't watch the sort of Gunter Cody segments. I'm not feeling a lot of the Kevin Owens storyline, who, by the way, will
Promo
have
in this
signed this
car.
new contract.
Loves a good promo in his car at contract time, doesn't he? But this is now a story. I think I'm liking that. I thought the stuff last week was good, as well as the justified heel who, everyone's turned on him. He didn't turn on anyone else. I think that suits what his indie character always was. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, outside of that was SmackDown, and obviously there were a load of 2-star matches too. That's enough praise for them. Outside of that, yeah, Raw is tonight. Don't need to go through that. Any other news or shows? Oh, Maple Leaf Pro. Did you manage to see any of that, JP? I've seen the main event of day 2. Very professional wrestling organization they've got up there in Canada. A new national. The Mauro Ronaldo and Dalton Callis commentary was trying to sell me on. Very much basically TNA 2, innit? They actually felt more MLW than TNA. Maybe just the presentation, the lighting, begins with M, the red. I don't know. There's something about it that felt like very canned MLW TV, but professional setup, good lighting, logos. I joke about the commentary team. Moro's not for me, but him and Don Callis is a pretty good team if you're going to be like a B-level promotion. A lot of people have got more time for Moro than I do. I've got time for Don Callis as a commentator. Thought he filled his role right, and there was a lot of AEW stuff on those shows from what I saw. Obviously, I saw the Takesh Josh Alexander match, which was very good. Obviously got paid off with Ricochet coming out. So Tony Khan as well. I am on Twitter putting over the shows, so he seems to be treating Maple Leaf Pro as a partner going forward. But yeah, did you see anything more than that, or did you see any more of the show?
I stopped watching the show because it was only today that I was able to start watching. It was the second one, and I stopped watching it to watch the Trump Undertaker interview as well, which I kind of had to see for this because I looked at these shows as more or less being like proof of concept. Can Scott D'Amore put this on? And funny enough, Simon in the chat has said here it's TNA for people who liked Impact. It is incredibly Impact, but I don't mean that in actually a derogatory way. It's got the MLW vibe of who the fuck is Classy Ali, who is terrible, the Qatar QPW champion who ends up losing to El Reverso. I wish I was making up his name, but apparently it really is a real thing. It was very well produced. Having commentators like that who sound very professional, like regardless of what we think about Mauro, he does have that kind of like credibility to him as a commentator. I thought the production looked good. Like it's a place where TNA have run Bound for Glory before at St. Clair College as well. And I've said this a few times, and I'm not the expert on this. I know John Pollock wrote a good piece today in his news update talking about it generally being seen as success, good crowd, came across well, felt like a good TV product. So it's like more of a proof of concept. Whether or not there is room in the marketplace for another promotion like this that sits alongside an Impact, that sits alongside an MLW, and even a Ring of Honor to a certain degree. There is elements of this, but something that's more Canadian specific. I know D'Amore was saying stuff about, I might run into Lash. It's like, no, mate, concentrate on Canada, hence the name Maple Leaf. I thought the opening package where it had Bret Hart doing some of the narration for it, talking about the history of Maple Leaf pro wrestling. I was like, okay, this is actually, some of this stuff is actually quite good. This is like, I thought it was, as a production, it looked quite good. I didn't get round to seeing the main events and heard generally, like you say, generally like decent things about Takeshita doing the 2 main events, and it was very much closely sort of tied in with AEW as well. So it feels like that's a place where AEW can perhaps shift a few people to if they're not using them. And D'Amore is very good at making the most out of the least. That's something that he's with Impact that he's always proven to do. And I think in general, a Scott D'Amore run product is something I'm kind of intrigued by. I always have been ever since his days like being in charge of TNA when he first was in charge of it. He always felt like he was the more competent pair of hands. I don't love everything he does. I'm not going to for any booker, but I thought the stuff he did here was generally quite good and it worked well for that audience. And it just had a look and feel to it where you went, yeah, this is like a good TV wrestling product. Can it be sold? Can it be funded long term? I don't know, because it's an expensive thing to run a company. Is there enough of a market in Canada for them to get them to be in? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought overall, for what they have and some of the talents they have, it is like there's some decent sort of like little green shoots of what something that could be a pretty good product, but we're not really going to know until they run the next set and whether or not is this momentum going to go, or was it just really a 1 weekend thing?
For a 1 weekend thing, obviously sold out both of the shows, so there's that positive. Like I said, I think they've set an upper limit on themselves by being the national Canadian promotion rather than going for something a bit more international. They've gone a bit big place, Canada, going there in 3 weeks, can't wait. But it makes them feel a bit regional rather than obviously we've got enough mainstream challenger promotions. Maybe it's an acknowledgement they can't be that, and it's an acknowledgement of we can fit this niche of being the national promotion for Canada, and maybe lean in that direction. It obviously makes them friendly to not so much competition to even TNA, who's letting them use guys. Obviously Josh Alexander being most notable, and obviously AEW being friendly to them as well. I mean, it sets them out a nice Switzerland spot, doesn't it? As far as being non-threatening to everybody, you can see them. I think I read that Paul piece as well. He was talking about the idea of them running the Maple Leaf Garden, which would be, a great. I walked past that when I was in Toronto and was just like, God, think of all the great WWF house shows that took place here, and ROH shows in the later 2000s as well. So yeah, they could carve themselves out a nice little niche. But yeah, I only saw that one match. I do want to see Speedball Mike Bailey in there with Takeshita as well. I believe that was a lot of fun as the main event tonight one. Outside of that, I'm not so sure there was much in the highlights of the shows that appealed too much to me to watch on rewatch, but definitely a news story to keep abreast of. But yeah, there we go. That's Maple Leaf Pro, unless MLW have run JP. I think that's all of the shows. Bit of kind of covered a bit of everything across the world, and even some Brit res to top off tonight, unless there's anything else that you've managed to see.
That's it. No, that's everything that I've managed to see this week as well. So yeah, I think that's it. We're in the run up to Bound for Glory, mate, next week. So
another big pay-per-view weekend, obviously. Yeah,
Bound for
Glory. And I think NXT have got one of the specials, PLEs, whatever they fucking call them, this Sunday as well. So we'll be watching.
So another big TNA show then this weekend.
Basically it's two of them. Might see some highlights of Bound for Glory for next week's show as well. But yeah, outside of that, obviously, as I mentioned, the pre-show had us with Matty and Andy talking some non-wrestler matters, and we did stray into some wrestling stuff as well. Some shots were fired. I'm not saying by who. That existed. We also did the weekend show on Thursday. If people want our elongated Dynamite thoughts for the follow-up to WrestleDream, we spent a good hour on that on Thursday. JP, Shane is out, and of course, coming up this week will be GRAPPL lads as me, Gareth, and Matty come to you from a pub somewhere. Anything I'm missing, JP? Oh, of course, Halloween Horror. That's coming up too. Big poll.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've still got some great stuff coming out. I'm interested to see you're going to manage a sneaky 6 points on this episode of GRAPPL lads, like you did the last time.
You'll hear us ordering. Yeah, that's how I'm going to keep track of how many we had by listening to the audio again. I go, fuck's sake, I forgot about that round.
That's risky for a Wednesday, mate. That isn't it? Because you're in the office on Thursdays, aren't you? As well. That's like
Jesus. Don't remind me. I might not be this Thursday. Maybe I'll
just do somewhere local to you. You'll be all right. Gareth's the boss at his place, so he can get away with it as well. Yeah, as long as you're walking distance from yours, that's what you want.
Cup podcast from the pub. That'll never work. But speaking of which, obviously, it was great having Andy on tonight. Graps and claps, wherever you get your audio, as well as all of his other great stuff. Definitely check that out too. But yeah, as always, thank you to our patrons for supporting us through the month. Thank you to our live patrons for staying up somewhat late with us. Nice earliest finish for us tonight, as Simon says there. But yeah, speaking of Simon, thanks to our Kings of the Mountain, Conor O'Loughlin, Eddie Sarburns, Chris Platt, Ewan Cameron, Carl Guy, and of course Simon Mulvaney and Mark Buckledy, who've both got shows coming up soon as well. But outside of that, we will catch you on GRAPPL, lads, midweek.
Bye.
Good night, all.